You can put it with that. Okay.
All right, we're going to start tonight's Finance Committee meeting at 7:07. I apologize for the delay. We had a couple of technical difficulties. I'd like to remind everyone we are being videotaped for future broadcast of both the cable and town website. First up tonight, we have the school committee. If you guys would like to come up, the administration as well. Go around and introduce ourselves. Let's go around and introduce ourselves. I think there are a couple that were not here. So I'm Ryan Hogan, the chairman. Go this way.
Mike Hutnick.
Pam Holmes.
Eric Chamberlain.
I'm Brett Argle.
Welcome, Brett.
Kevin Baines.
Courtney Keegan. Sherry Zetman.
Leila Hoos. Cindy Sharrick.
Carol Gogolinsky.
Howard D'Amico.
Okay. Thank you guys for coming tonight. I know you have some stuff you want to present to start. Is that how you want to go about it?
Okay. Yeah, we do. I'm going to start off, I guess. So if you want to just send those that way, and then these three this way. Originally, we were hoping to project this. I did bring a couple of extras. I know it'll be difficult for anybody who's in the audience not to be able to sort of follow along. I don't know if anybody back there would
Pass that down. It's extras.
Okay. One second. So thank you very much for the opportunity to meet with the Finance Committee tonight. In the packet I just gave you, if you could just separate out the PowerPoint. I'm not doing that first. I wanted to go through, one of the things that I was hoping that you would afford us the liberty was to sort of give you an idea as to the district and provide you with some data. I know that was, I had been reached out to ask to provide some data to give an idea as to how the district is performing in comparisons and so forth. So I just grabbed some data for you to look at so that you would have an idea as to where we are as a district. The first thing that I gave you in your packet is the 2017 grade 10 MCAS results. And as you can see, the first thing you see there is the grade 10 ELA comparison, in which 97% of our students scored in the proficient or advanced category without any warnings or failures, putting us right up there with Mendon Upton as well as Grafton. You can see Sutton and Hopedale as well. The math is the area of concern as of right now. Right now you see it's at 72%. Normally it's in the 80-85 category. We had more failures than warnings this year than in previous years. That is something that we have been working on with a portfolio program, and we're hoping to address any students in the needs improvement and warning category, providing them with additional supports. And on the back page you can see the grade 10 science comparison, where we are fourth in the valley of the schools that we provided, with 77% of our students proficient or advanced. Over the 9 years that I've been here, there has never been an instance where a student in Douglas has not met all of the competencies. Not once has there been. So over a period of time, if you were in needs improvement in a warning category, we implemented supports. That allowed the students to get extra attention, and by the time they graduated, everyone in the 9 years so far has received the qualifying scores on the competencies. I then provided you with a quick overview of the 2015-2016 was the easiest one to grab. It's a comparison, as you can see, with 13 schools in the districts in the area. You can see the number of tests that were taken. The advanced placement testing is a student who receives a 3, 4, or a 5 on the testing can receive college credit for that test and waive a college course if the colleges are accepting of that. So what you have there is that we took 195 tests, and you can see that 61.5% of the students who took that test received a 3, 4, or a 5. And you can see in comparison to how that matches up, the only school that above us is Mendon Upton and Grafton. And so those are that's just a quick overview of 2015-16. The next one is a quick overview of a 2006 through 2016 by exam, which I'm not going to go through all of them, but that give you an idea as to those students, the right-hand column of those students, percentage of students who are reaching a competency of 3 or better. And that gives you a very good idea as to how we're performing in each of those disciplines. And as you can see, very strong numbers across the board, with all of them being greater than 50% other than physics and Spanish 1. Okay, I'm sorry, there's another one up there? Microeconomics, yep. And by the way, we are probably one of the only school districts in the area that does offer that microeconomics as well. The next page gives you a 5-year comparison of our school district against other districts. Again, the far right-hand side gives you a 5-year percentage of how our students are performing on the advanced placement test. So if you look across to the far right, over those 5 years, we took 877 exams, and our qualifying score percentage was 65.66, which is up there with virtually all of the schools in the district. I would call to your attention that we took 877 exams over those 5 years, and a school like Grafton, which is probably a third greater in population than ours, only took 601. And a school like BMR, which is the same population as ours, only took 377. And the reason for that is that back in 2012-13, we engaged in a program called the Massachusetts Math Science Initiative, in which we partnered up with ExxonMobil and the Gates Family Foundation, and we made a conscious decision to afford students who had a vested interest in taking an advanced placement course to take it. As you know, prior to that, for the most part, most school districts had a very restrictive enrollment in APs. You had to have a certain criteria, and it was very restrictive for students. We opened it up to all students and any students, and with that in mind, we're at 65.66 qualifying scores, which is a very strong showing over the last 10 years. I then provided you the colored map is a 5-year look at where Douglas is in regards to SAT scores. And you'll see that each column in color has the number of tests taken, the score, the average score for reading, writing, and math. And if you follow it across, you can see that for the most part, over the past 5 years, the average score for a Douglas student taking an SAT is greater than 500 and somewhere in the area of around 512, 513, in some instances even higher at 520 for average scores, 522 for average scores. And if you compare it, and I know it's a lot of information, but if you compare it and look at other school districts, you would see that we are, again, in the top 5 of these 13 Valley schools. And that's something also that we're very, very proud of. I had been asked to provide some information on higher education, which is the next document in your packet. You can see that it covers Douglas and higher education from 2003, 2004 through 2014, 2015. And you can see that on average, where it says attending C and U, so attending a college or a university, that's the percentage of our students that are attending. You can see that 72% in 2003-04. We're at 79, and it's held pretty steady across the board, indicating that we're in that ballpark of around 80%, 75 to 80% of our students are going on to a college or a university from Douglas High School. And that's over the period, as I said, from 2003-04 through 14-15. Something also that we're very pleased with. The next document that you have is just a listing of colleges and universities that students from Douglas have been attending over the past 10 years. And you can see that it runs the gamut from some of the Ivy League schools. You've also got the 2 big schools in Boston, and I understand that one of our members had some good news from one of the Boston schools, so congratulations to him. Very pleased about that. And it runs the whole gamut all the way down to and through military service and also trade schools as well, to give you an idea of just where our students are going. It's not all-inclusive, obviously, but it is very reflective of the number of students, where our students are going when they leave Douglas High School. Okay, and then the next thing that I did provide was just a quick overview of, for your review, is the per pupil differentials and histories over 2016, which is a separate document, and then 2012, 13, 14, 15, and 16, and a 5-year average that you can take a look at as to where we are with regards to per pupil expenditures. As you can see, our 5-year average is $10,529 per student. It is the lowest in the valley. Northbridge is the closest at $11,647. And the purpose of this is to indicate that there's a differential there of 1,118. And if that were over 5 years, that would be $1.8 million that we would have had additionally into our budget. So again, and I think there's some other information down the road that we can talk about, but that's just a real quick run through of where we're at. And then the question that was asked that we wanted to speak to tonight specifically was, we had been asked, given our budget and given the limitations that might exist with that budget, how are we staying competitive with our neighboring schools? And so the handout that I gave you, this PowerPoint, will sort of take you through it, and I'll try to run through it relatively quickly. The document that you have in front of you is a collaboration of the administrative team, and we took the time to put together this plan. It is really, hopefully it is a short-range plan, and by that I mean that everything that I'm going to talk about tonight, we could never possibly implement in 1 year, but we could, over a period of 4 or 5 years, hopefully implement many of the things that I'm going to present to you. Critical to all of this is that we have, and I think that everyone should be engaging in an honest conversation about the quality of our schools as they exist right now. What are our strengths? What are our areas of need? How do we maintain competitiveness with the Blackstone Valley schools that we talked about? And I think that as we go forward, there's going to be a good deal of public conversation about this and how do we best serve our students. So, I would emphasize that we really do focus on a growth mindset for our students. We want to see them continue to strive to look to get themselves into the best school they can, or be the best prepared they can be to go into the workforce, or if they're going into the military. One thing that I will tell you, and that I'm extremely pleased with, is that our school buildings, I believe, are a safe and supportive learning environment, all 4 of our school buildings. Our educators are committed to student learning. I believe that each of our buildings has a positive school climate. Our administrative team works as a collaborative unit. We have engaged in a great deal of work talking about where we are, where we would like to go, and how do we get there. I will tell you that we have an awesome student body. Our students are just fantastic people, young people, and we're very fortunate to have such wonderful students in our building, as well as our support staff and our faculty, I believe, are exceptional. So what's required of the district? Well, this is, I think, part of the reason why you wanted to chat with us is the issue of financial stability is really critical to us. How do we continue to fund things that we already have in the budget? So we have technology, we have one-to-ones in our district. How do we maintain those, and how do we maintain that they're being used to the best impact that they can have in the classroom? How are they supporting student learning? How do we maintain funding for all of our programs? And by that I'm talking about athletic programs, extracurricular programs, band choral programs. How do we keep money in the budget that's going to allow us to fund all of those programs so that our students can engage in the second component of education, which is the social aspect of it, as well as the physical aspect of sports or other programs, whether it be Student Council or National Honor Society or the newspaper. All of those programs are critical and an important piece of what we do. Again, the goal of this is to be as competitive as we can. Presently, the Douglas Public School District is a Level 2 district as designated by the Department of Education. Our goal is to move us to a Level 1 school, and that is going to continue to be our expectation. So the budget that we presented to the town was a level service budget, and inclusive in that budget were these additional positions that you can see that were reinstated, or for the most, or in 2 instances were new, that the school committee had the courage last year to say, we're going to need to dig a little deeper into our revolving accounts, because if we don't, we're going to again be forced to cut teachers, increase class sizes, cut programs. Now, in doing so, they dug deeper into the revolving accounts, and it was a calculated risk of how to stabilize our district, to mitigate what's been going on. One thing that I want to come back to is when you looked at those AP stats, in 2000, I think it was 14-15 was when we had the biggest cut in our budget. And those who remember, we cut all of our programs, we eliminated quite a number of staff, and we had not made any progress in trying to reinstate any of those for the last couple of years. So if you look at that, the positions that we added that came out of the revolving account, which is used elsewhere as well, this was a deeper dive into that. We added a 5th grade teacher, a 0.5 6th grade teacher, excuse me, because our class enrollments with class sizes were going to be 32. And we just felt that that was not tenable for grade 6. We reinstated the Dean of Students. The Dean of Students previously was a middle school position. Now it is an elementary school, middle school position. The individual is going back and forth and managing both school buildings, which in turn has allowed the administrators to be able to get into classrooms and do more evaluation piece, which they could not do with any kind of consistency, because you never knew what was going to come down to the office for them to manage. We brought in a Title I math teacher, which is something that we had talked about for quite a number of years, looking to bring a Title I math teacher in, because we knew that our math scores were lagging behind, and we're better to attack that than early on. And that's what we brought in, the Title I teacher, which is going between the primary school and the elementary school. One of the areas of great concern within the community was the music program. And we had previously cut a music position to a point from a 1.0, a full-time position, to a part-time position. And in turn, we had seen a decrease in student participation in the band programs. So by adding that position, I'm happy and pleased to tell you that the participation numbers at the middle school have gone through the roof. The choral program has got great numbers. They have already performed one presentation, and they'll be doing another one in the spring. The numbers are really gone back up again, which is critical for our marching band, but also for our concert bands. We increased our special education coordinator from a full-time, from a 192-day schedule to a full-time schedule. Primary motivator behind that was an increase in our English learners that have come into the district. Previously in 2000 back 7 years, so there was 0 English learners. Last year was the first year that we had an English learner, and this year we have 8 English learners. And those English learners require some additional structure, and she provides that for us. We had cut our librarian at the high school. Right now, the Douglas High School is going through the NEAS process, which is the accreditation process. One of the primary components to the building is to have a librarian in the building who is working to assist the faculty. We had cut that position for 2 years. We brought it back on a part-time contingency basis this year to get us prepared for the NEAS evaluation to address that shortcoming. We reinstated the kindergarten teacher. The kindergarten classes were going to be on an average of 28. We just didn't feel that you could have a kindergarten with 28 students in them. And there's a paraprofessional that goes along with it. And then the last piece of what we did last year to try to keep us as competitive as possible was we reduced the athletic user fee from $300 to $225 with no caps. Previously, 4 years ago, it was $150 with caps for an individual and caps for a family. It had gone up to $300, no caps at all. So if you had a child who was playing 3 sports, it would cost you $900. If you had 3 children participating, you can do the math, it became price prohibitive for a lot of kids. We did see a decrease in participation numbers. So going forward, what is the expectation? What are we looking for? So looking at each individual school, the primary school, the goal is to maintain our existing staffing levels because that will provide us with appropriate class sizes. We want to continue to keep our full-day pre-K. We want to continue to implement the social emotional learning component, which is a professional development piece that is implemented in all classes that supports students. We would look to move a 0.5 adjustment counselor to a 1.0 to be available at all times to service students within the building. We want to maintain the Title I math position that goes between two schools. And there is a consideration, one of the things that I will tell you is that so along the way, we made cuts in the area of special education. And so you've got, for example, at the primary school, one person managing 2 grade levels of special education students. So that's the primary school. For the elementary school, we want to maintain all of our existing staff levels there. We have a self-funded and very successful after-school program that's going on in the elementary school. They also are engaged in the social emotional learning component. They also have a need for the 0.5 position. The 1.0 adjustment counselor is shared between 2 buildings. What we would like to do is add a 1.0 adjustment counselor so we have 1 in each building, which at this point in time we do not have. They're going between 2 buildings trying to provide support in that way. We would like to implement a technology integration position, someone who could probably work within 2 buildings, but to support our teachers and also our students so that they are effectively using the technology that we have secured for them. And then also, again, at that school, they also have 4 grades, but only 2 special education teachers, so they're splitting them. For the middle school, we, again, the same thing goes along, maintain our staffing levels, keep our extracurricular programs, keep our athletic programs, and keep our band choral program in place. We would like to move our science technology course from the high school down to the middle school where we think it'll be more effective. We would like to add a computer applications program down at the middle school. Presently, we have that at the high school. We would like to transition it down to the middle school. It would allow our students to work with Word, Excel, PowerPoint, Google Docs, Google Slides, and it would be a sort of a learning experience with all of those uses for those programs, so the kids are better prepared to use them when they get to the high school level rather than trying to learn about it when they're in the high school. We'd like to reestablish the STEM integration piece, which has been sort of somewhat compromised over the last couple of years. Presently, we have a 0.5, a half-time phys ed teacher, but we offer no health or wellness in the middle school at all. We would like to add health and wellness in there. Again, a technology integration person, which might again be a shared position. They are going to review some of their scheduling to try to provide more opportunities for student learning. And then the last piece, again, is the special education, 3 grades, 2 people, splitting the 3 grades. Then we get to the high school, the last school in the district. Again, maintaining our advanced placement courses, keeping our extracurricular programs, all of our athletic programs, band, chorus, and auxiliary programs. Those are all we feel are very critical. As for offerings for our kids to allow them to become better prepared as they go to college, one of the areas that we would like to use is our business program. Now, the business program presently exists. When we brought this in about 5-6 years ago, the plan was that they were going to offer personal finance, entrepreneurship, marketing 1, marketing 2, and accounting. Unfortunately, when we began cutting positions, that teacher began teaching computer applications, 2 sections of computer applications, so we weren't able to maintain those programs. Ideally, we would love to bring those back. I think it's a great training ground for those kids who are going on to a business college, a Brandeis, a Bryant, a Babson. They would get a wide stretch of content that would get them prepared to be successful in those schools, or for those people who might be graduating and going right into retail, they would have a real good solid understanding of the retail component as well through the entrepreneurship. So we would like to try to implement that. We have talked and we are looking at the possibility of exploring a engineering program that is a 4-year program that would allow our students to take engineering 1, 2, and 3, and then their 4th year to do an internship, which would allow them to go out into the world and actually utilize those skills learned in a business. We do offer an internship program at the high school already. One of the areas that we know is of great importance is the area of engineering, and we would like to transition from our manufacturing 1 and 2 and our computer design and really focus more on the engineering piece, because we think it has a much more applicable skill right into industry from high school, if that's the case, or for them going on to a technology school upon graduation. So that would be an engineering program. We would like to offer biomedical into our curriculum. We recently brought back anatomy and physiology. The goal behind this is to have a medical component that will allow a student to take these four courses and be pretty strong and pretty well prepared should they be going into the medical field, whether it's nursing, nurse's aide, or doctor, going into that type of a field. We have biomedical, we have anatomy and physiology, AP bio, AP chemistry would be a nice pathway for students to follow and be well prepared should they be interested in going into the medical field. Right now, we just brought back anatomy and physiology. We do not have biomedical. If you look, one of the things we look to do is we're going to transition that. I mentioned the science technology coming out of the curriculum. We want to bring in college prep physics at grade 9 or grade 10. The reason for that is that previously the state issued science technology as an MCAS competency. A kid could take a MCAS test in grade 9 in science technology. If they passed it, they have met their requirement for the state because they passed their one science. That is no longer an option, so therefore physics is now what the Department of Ed is moving towards in grade 9 and 10. We would like to implement that in grade 9 and 10, again, because it is also an MCAS competency exam. An area that is of great concern in every district in the state is going to be struggling with this is how do you go about implementing a coding and computer programming program in your district. And it really does belong from kindergarten, pre-K, all the way up. Our goal would be to bring it into the high school where we already have Java and C++ and web design and a number of technology pieces, but this would be more geared towards the coding and computer science, advanced placement in computer science that we presently don't have in the district. It is an initiative that is being brought forward by the state. Presently, we do not have that. Most districts are beginning to grapple with this. We will also need to grapple with this because it is going to become a requirement down the road. Presently, we do not have it. The other piece is to look at animal and plant science. We have been engaged in some conversations. I have met with a local farm, an orchard and a farm, to try to establish an internship there. As you know, animal and plant sciences has become very important. A lot of students are looking to take those courses, and as such, they're not able to take them in our district, so therefore they are taking them elsewhere. And there's the opportunity to, there has been a great deal of conversation already about a collaborative within the building, within the Blackstone Valley, to form a collaborative that would allow our students to stay in our district, but also to take courses in animal science and plant science, and to have an internship program as part of that, where they'd be able to go out to the farm and also work with animals, but as well as with the plants. I even have brought the gentleman who's spearheading this down to the grammar school, and you'll be happy to know that he is actually very impressed with that building. And there is a satellite campus that will come. It is associated with UMass and also with Wachusett Community College. So I have put that on the table. They're also looking at Uxbridge at the middle school, the McCluskey Middle School, as a possibility. But this is a burgeoning area. It is also an opportunity for us to offer the programs for students who aren't able to get into a vocational school. Maybe we can offer them so they can still get that training, they can still get that learning, but also to offer the animal and plant sciences, because we have a number of students who have to go out to Norfolk to do that course, to do that program. It's an hour out, hour back. It's a huge family commitment, and it would be great if we could keep those students here and offer that same program for them. That is something that we're underway, and we have begun the process of exploring. It certainly would not be in the next coming school year, but I would hope that no later than the following school year, if we can have that online and be part of that collaboration. And then the only other thing I would mention is, again, at the high school we have 4 grade levels, but we only have 2 special education teachers. They're sharing 2 complete grade levels on their caseload. And then the other piece is that We have not been able to, in the past 7 years, as a principal at the high school, I had put on the budget a request for an adjustment counselor within our high school, and every year it has never made it even into the actual budget that was voted on. It was taken out. We do not have an adjustment counselor in a high school with 400 young people presently. So that means that anybody and everybody is sort of serving in that capacity, which pulls them away from other job responsibilities as well. And the only other piece that was in there that is really critical is the security piece. And I think we all had an opportunity to see the marches that took place on the weekend. Well, that being said, we have begun the process of, we've moved to the ALICE protocols, which is the school safety and lockdown procedures. And one of the pieces that came out of that is, in walking the buildings, is that there are some needs for some security. By that I mean, if you're familiar with the high school or the middle school, when you go in the main entranceway, you go through the first set of doors that are locked. There's a second set of doors that are not locked that we would like to transition to having them be locked and be buzzed in. So you have to get through 2 sets of doors to get into the building. Same thing at the middle school. We talked about maybe trying to add a lazy Susan. So in other words, when somebody comes in to bring a lunch for their student that forgot it, you don't need to come into the building. Thank you very much. What's the name? Put it in there, flip it around, and it comes into the office, and we minimize the amount of people that are getting into our building. There's a cost factor. Cameras at the high school. The new buildings have a ton of cameras. They're really, really beneficial. The high school has added a few cameras, but nowhere near are they at a place where they could cover the entirety of the building. Key cards. The middle school needs a key card entrance for the faculty, as does the primary school needs a key card entrance as well. Walkie-talkies. We presently are, we have taken a number of steps. All of our buildings now have the panic switch in a number of locations within the building that goes directly to the police station. We also have a shared walkie-talkie that we use, that we're all on the same, that one channel that doesn't get used for anything but us to the police, police to us. Unfortunately, when we did that, we now have fewer walkie-talkies to use for communication, so we need additional walkie-talkies. And if you were listening to what a lot of the people have been saying, is that why don't we have a school resource officer in every building? I think we know the answer to that, but the question is one school resource officer in Douglas enough to cover all 4 buildings? And that would be something that we would also need to take a look at. That's as fast as I can get through all of that, but you can see there's a lot of things on the docket. But I would also say that the one thing I hope you did see is that we are still performing very well compared to those schools in the Valley, and we are extremely proud of that as well. And so I think I'm turning it over to Brett, or my...
You guys want to catch your...
Yeah.
I'm gonna let Kevin catch his breath.
Can we
Maybe ask a
applaud?
question, yeah.
Maybe get some water. There you go.
Thank you.
Is it okay if we ask a couple of questions?
Sure.
Yeah.
The statistics you went through earlier about the AP and the SAT scores,
Correct.
are those shown to the 7th and 8th grade parents? I know you did do a presentation about the high school.
I'm going to tell you, I couldn't be any more shameless when I presented that. I actually got in a little bit of hot water. Some people were concerned that I was trying to dissuade students. I wasn't.
Right.
I was trying to be factual. This is what we have, this is where we are, this is where other schools are.
Okay.
That was shared with them the last couple of years, and I did 2 presentations to the student body, grade 8, and I did 2 presentations to the parents of grade 8 students, but I'm going to be honest, it wasn't standing room only.
Right.
I don't have a problem with you dissuading students.
Okay? Well, I didn't want to be that brazen, but I did, but the answer to the question is yes.
Yeah.
Can I
So the question-
piggyback onto that question as well?
Yeah.
As part of that, not only have you shown them the statistics, but for the students in the 7th and the 8th grade, have you maybe brought them up to the high school and
Yes,
done
they
like
do
a student shadowing?
Right, so they come up for a walkthrough, they do a step-up day. They come through, they get an opportunity to learn about the programs that we offer, the clubs that we offer. So they do that in June, they do that. But we go down in October, and we go down in April, because in April they
June
start.
Prior to 8th grade, June.
Right,
June
right.
Prior to 8th grade.
Right, it's the annual step-up day, yep. So that is covered, all of that is covered. I do a video that shows what the life in Douglas High School is. It shows kids, it's just a slideshow with some music in the background that shows all the things that we have to offer at Douglas High School.
I had a question along the same lines. Would you consider putting together some sort of a booklet that could be sent to the homes that shows how the Douglas High School is actively enjoying their after-school activities or whatever, as well as putting how the academics are being addressed and the follow-up with the grades?
Sure. Happy to do that.
A mailing would get to everyone when parents sometimes can't attend in the evenings or even the afternoons.
Right. So I'm happy to do that. We do produce each year a portfolio that goes. It's this folded over 3 times, a couple of pages that has a lot of that information that is available. We have never mailed it out, however.
Yeah.
So we do have something like that,
I mean,
and I
think
can
we have-
embellish upon it.
I think we have some resources.
No, it does not.
Resources in the community that we could probably ask our Voc Tech to print out that information for us. I think they do that for other groups. They might be able to do that at a good rate for you.
Okay, very good. Happy to do it.
Is there a perception that the fee, the sports fee, is still driving some of this?
So I will explain this to you. We recently mailed out, Sherry, how many surveys?
Over 300.
Over 300 surveys. And the surveys are for those students who opted not to stay in Douglas.
Yeah.
It went out a week ago Friday, so we're getting them in numbers. I think we're at about 60 or 70 that have been returned. I will tell you that a couple of them were issues of the students who wanted to follow a vocational course. There's a good number of them that have come back that they were uncomfortable or not convinced that the programs they wanted were going to remain in the district because they were going to be cut. And no one has ever indicated that. I haven't read all of them. I don't know that anybody has said that the user fee was the primary reason why I left. But I'm sure that is a factor without question. I believe it's only $50 to participate at BVT, and it's $225 for us. Hopefully, it's $225 for us. I don't know if it needs to go back up to keep the programs alive.
So I'm going to piggyback onto that. So the word that we used a lot in going back to the summer when we were talking about adding submissions on through use of our school choice funds was stability, trying to stabilize our school system. The word that we kind of came up with today that really gets to it is certainty. A big reason I think students might be leaving is uncertainty here and certainty about where they might be going. BVT's budget goes up every single year. They've had minimal cuts over the last 10 years. You know exactly what you're getting. You can commit there now and know you're getting there 4 years from now. People have not been able to say that about the Douglas school system over the last 10 years, that there is certainty in what programs are going to be offered from year to year. You're going to find that as a key with our budget presentation as well. We're trying to, again, establish some stability, some consistency, and some certainty around what we're able to offer our community going forward.
And if I could just jump onto that, I'm going to pass this around to you just real quickly. I put it together right before we left. Do you mind passing that along? Thank you. Because the question is, and I think what you're driving at is, why are kids leaving and what's the impact? The document that I just put together for you is student enrollment information. So I went back to the year 2012, 2013. The number of students who were choicing into our district, as you can see there, and I don't know if others want to take a look at this. We do have them, if they want to share them behind you. There was 110 students who were choicing in. There were 40 students who were choicing out. There were 64 students attending private schools. There were 72 students attending BVT, and there were 0 students attending Norfolk Aggie. In 2014, 2015, I remember having this conversation at school committee. We were starting to see our participation numbers. From my standpoint as a high school principal, we were seeing more and more kids wanting to come in because we had opened up the advanced placements to anybody who wanted to take the challenge. And our enrollments had gone up, and our school choice, as you can see, went up 25 students in just 2 years. People were buying what we were selling. They were on board. School choice out was 39, private was 76, BVT was 79, Norfolk was 1. The bottom drops out. 2015, and I know there were some people in the room who were sitting here who were doing everything they possibly could to keep our programs in place. We cut staff across the district. We had 28 to 29 students in elementary classes across the board. We eliminated all of the athletic programs. We eliminated all of the band choral programs. I eliminated all but the required extracurriculars within the district. And all of a sudden, things changed to where we are right now in 2017, 2018. We're static with where we were 5 years ago, and choice in. 76 additional students choicing out, 123 going to private school, 110 going to BVT, 8 at Norfolk. So, and Jean remembers this, and we said this in open session, I can't tell you how many times we said this. We said to you that if there is, as Brett just mentioned, uncertainty, students are not going to stay, students are going to look elsewhere. And we said it was coming, and it's here in full force right now.
I think on top of this, we're actually in a decreasing demographic with school-age children as well, and you're still seeing increases in the number of students going outside, so.
Excellent
just
point.
kind of
Compounds it.
compounds that there.
Is there a desire then to get back to year over year over year of the certainty, recognizing that that's going to be a primary goal? It may take a few years.
I think it is.
Stop
I
that.
think that
Bleeding.
that not only helps
Establish
our
where we
school
were.
system, it helps the students trying to make a decision whether stay here to choice to another school system. It helps parents trying to make a decision whether to stay in Douglas or to move someplace else potentially. And also it helps the town side budget when you're not paying as much in fixed costs for Norfolk Aggie, BVT, school choice out.
Well,
Stabilize that budget.
I've said before, I've got a 10th grader now who was in 8th grade a couple of years ago, and rumors in 8th grade run rampant, and the rumors of the imminent demise of a whole system had no foundation but ran through.
I
Just
think part of it is
ran
now
through.
too, it has a bit of a snowball effect too, where my brother went 2 years ago, and now I'm automatically going to BVT. That's my choice. My brother made that choice for me, and I think that's might be some of the reason why you're starting to
So
see
the
some of
emphasis
these.
now is to re-stabilize and
That's
create a
what-
perception
That's
of.
really always been our.
No, and I don't. yeah,
Always.
that's fine.
Always,
Yeah.
always. It's not a new thing.
No,
Right. we
not
If
all
you
keep
can't
our
stabilize,
kids.
there's no
Right.
reason for them to believe that
Right,
you're,
right.
that they should stay.
There's still gonna be reasons for kids to go to school,
Which is
and
fine,
rightfully
yeah.
so, and we're not, again, not trying to say that 100% of kids need to stay here. There's perfectly valid reasons for kids to go to these other schools. We want them going for the right reasons, and we want kids staying here for the right reasons.
Right.
When this happened in 2000, after the 2015 year, we also said in open session when this was happening, was that as soon as students decide and parents decide that they're going to take their students out of the district, that it would take you X number of years, stable years, to turn that around.
Yep.
And you're looking at already 2 years into it, and my guess would be that it would take us 5 or 6 years, because what people are saying is, good school district, great people, a lot of uncertainty. And what we want to say is, great school district, great programs, they're moving forward, they're trying to be competitive with everybody in the valley. They want to remain as competitive as possible with other districts, and as a result, I'm going to stay. But until you can do that, and you can consistently do it for a number of years, there's always going to be that question mark. And that question mark is going to mean, well, maybe I will go.
I think the word we used on the Strategic Budget Committee many years ago was called sustainability, which is, it's really everything you're talking about. They have something you can count on. We all know that there are many factors why Douglas has had unsustainable budgets, and some of them we'll see later on today.
The word we used was trying to mitigate the impacts, and that was the primary reason why the
exactly.
school committee did what they did.
Absolutely.
which-
Stop the bleeding,
Which is not
basically.
a sustainable recipe, but it has, hopefully, it will hopefully, if we can maintain going forward, it will hopefully allow people to start believing that we're gonna stay where we are, we're still gonna be competitive, and that maybe we're out of the woods a little bit.
In my opinion, it also means you can't wind up in the Telegram and Gazette using naughty words about the imminent future of our town if certain things don't pass,
Yeah, we'll touch on that, but.
Right,
I-
not you
I-
guys.
I agree fully.
right?
Yeah.
Same concept. You can't be saying maybe, maybe not. The answer is yes, we're here.
So Ron, I know you're pressed for
Thank
time.
you.
Do you want to cover this? or-
Yeah, let's cover
Okay.
this, let's
So-
get through what we need to get through.
I emailed out a document today to all of you, some of you maybe had a chance to read it, I know I heard
It's
from
a
a couple of you.
two-pager that says Douglas
Two pages, you have it?
Budget in
Okay.
Perspective. I
Yeah.
passed it around right before I,
Here, you guys all have yours? Go ahead. Hand out the extras to whoever wants them. This touches on a lot of things that Kevin's already touched on here. I kind of, summarized some high-level bullet points. I tried to sit down and look at things. I was on the other side of the table the last 3 years with you guys, so, and I know you got a couple of new folks. So what are the things that I wish I knew when I was first starting out with this? Or what are some things that maybe could be reminders for folks? 7th lowest out of roughly 320 districts. That's our average rank in per pupil expenditure over the last 10 years. We've bottomed out dead last 4 times during that time. I'm sorry, twice. 2nd lowest 4 times. 3rd lowest once. The last 2 years, we've actually come out of the bottom 10. FY17, we're 31st lowest in total per pupil expenditure. 2 driving factors with that. A decreasing population is spreading our fixed costs across fewer students, and our out-of-district special education expenditures still continue to rise at a just exponential rate over the last 10 years, contributing to that total ranking there. If you exclude and just look at in-district, we rank 22nd lowest across the state in FY17. 23% and 13% lower. That's what we compare across the state in per pupil expenditure between FY12 and FY17. If you take our average over those years, take the state average, take the average of surrounding towns. My surrounding town population is a little bit different than what Kevin showed earlier. It's pretty similar though. So in dollar terms, our PPE per pupil expenditures, $3,300 lower than the state average, $1,600 lower than the average of surrounding towns during that time frame per pupil each year.
Can I just
Sure.
interject something here?
Yes.
You're aware that there are many factors that cause the state contribution to Douglas under Chapter 70, and one of them is the municipal revenue growth factor,
Yes.
which no one has been able to figure out why our municipal revenue growth factor is what it is. It appears that Douglas is a well-to-do community.
It does.
It is not.
Yeah. I know.
Have you looked into that
I have.
factor?
So there's.
I've had many
Within net school
conversations.
spending, there's the required local contribution, which
Yep.
has some connection to that municipal
Yep.
growth factor you talk about.
Yep.
When you look at Douglas on a per capita income perspective,
Mm-hmm.
we rank a little bit, slightly into the top half of the state. I think
Mm-hmm. right.
we're about the 45th percentile, or the 55th percentile, anyway, top half. So from a well-to-do, I guess, I don't know if they consider that well-to-do, because you're top half there.
And they look at land, I
We
believe.
also, and from a valuations
Right.
perspective, we're actually bottom third when it comes to the land
Right,
valuation,
right.
per capita.
Right.
Again, it's,
In that calculation, I've spoken to the DOE, I've spoken to Roger Hatch many times. There is no calculation about whether or not we have commercial industrial properties,
right,
none at all.
right.
And that is Douglas's problem.
Yeah,
I
definitely
mean,
contributes to it.
that municipal revenue growth factor is missing a large component that is driving Douglas's lack of ability to fund.
Yeah, and I guess maybe some of the good news is that they've had a target out there for
Yep.
local contribution versus state contribution, which we were several percentage points under for the
Right.
last several years. I think we finally hit our target this
Right.
year. So they're not gonna be asking for us to cover as much, or at
Right.
least we're there, so they're not
Yep.
trying to make up ground anymore. So that's gonna help,
But
but
it
that
doesn't-
target is probably too high. It used to
Right.
be that the state was paying roughly 55%
Yeah.
of our school, and we were paying 45. They're now
Right.
looking for us to pay 54%.
Right.
You know, they basically switched those two numbers around.
Right.
And we've been struggling over the last couple of years
Trying
to
to do
get to
that.
that 54% by them, and then that can then kind of dictates some of our Chapter 78, or at least whether we get minimum contributions or anything higher.
Thank you, I just wanted to get that information out.
Yeah.
Another perspective I want to give on this, I respect these numbers, I understand where you're coming from.
Yep.
But truth of the matter is, that's really half the story.
Okay.
The other half is the information that Kevin
Yeah.
put forth a few minutes ago of our school numbers. So, you know,
Right.
I look
No,
at
that's
these
what-
statistics that you've
Yeah.
given out, and you know, yeah, we're at the bottom of the pile as
Yeah.
far as per
And I-
pupil
yeah,
spending.
When I put this together, I asked Kevin to make sure he covers the performance side of things. I think
Right.
that's the other half here.
This, I mean, what that tells me is we're very efficient with what we have. You know, if our grade scores were lower, you know, I look at this and say, you know, what's the story that these numbers are projecting? If our grade scores were suffering because of this,
Yeah.
I'd say got a bigger problem than what we have.
It does. I mean,
The
again,
fact that we're able
we've
to stay
become a-
competitive with towns like Mendon, Upton, Grafton, and EMR, and BVT, and Sutton, and all the rest of them, I mean, I think that gives that's
No.
like gold star status for
It does,
Douglas,
yeah,
to
no.
be able to do what we can do
Kudos
with what
to
we
the
have.
administration and all the teachers in this district and to our students for all these years. I understand.
I mean,
Yeah.
it gives credence to the fact that you don't have to spend money just to spend money. You can,
You don't, but I think a lot of this contributes to those other factors of the choicing out. You can have the performance, and that performance has been consistent, and I think we do a good job of letting folks know about that. Maybe not a great job, but it's still not gonna keep kids here necessarily, so.
Perception becomes.
You're bouncing along the bottom.
Yeah, perception
So
becomes.
We're not at the
That we're not performing
sustainability.
well, because not everybody sees all of this
Right.
data. And that's, you know, part of the problem, but also,
but that's part of the marketing campaign that
It
needs
is,
to take
yeah.
place.
And Mike,
in
I
town.
don't know if you read this, but you actually skipped ahead to my conclusions on the next page there, you know, but, yeah. So, yeah, I'll skip to the next one. Required net school spending. That equals your Chapter 78 that you get from the state, plus a required local contribution that the state calculates for you based on your town property value and resident income. 25.1%. That is what, across the state, towns spend above net school spending, above what the state is telling them they have to spend at a minimum, 25% higher than that. 16.3%, that's the percent that the average of surrounding towns spend above required net school spending. In FY17, our budget was 2.1% above net school spending. That translates to roughly $212 per student. Across the state, that 25% above it translates to $2,500 per student. They're spending above the minimum the state says they have to. For surrounding towns, it's $1,800 more per student they're spending every year than what the state tells them they have to.
Do you know if that includes, those numbers include vocational technical schools?
The state numbers?
Yeah.
No, net school spending, no, vocational technical is not included
They're not
in net
included
school
in
spending. No,
Okay.
no.
Not ours,
School choice out is, but not BVT, not the Aggie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But does BVT have their own net school spending in the overall, that 25% for the state, is other vocational schools?
I mean, they have their
included in
own,
that?
oh yeah, they
Yeah,
have their own
exactly.
separate, in fact, it'll
Yeah.
be, they're in this
Yeah,
document
so
that I'll be
they're in the
handing out in a minute.
averages, and actually,
So they are in the
I think I have
averages.
them in the averages for the 16.3 as
Right,
well.
okay, okay, so they are. Because
Um,
that does skew the numbers, because they're much,
They're
much
actually not the
higher.
highest.
Yeah.
You know, around the
Yeah.
surrounding
Oh, yeah.
towns. They were kind of middle of the road, compared to the surrounding
Mm-hmm.
towns. So, actually, I have it right here. They were, yeah, almost, dead middle, yeah. So what that translates to, if Douglas spent even 10% above required net school spending, it would mean an extra $1.2 million in our budget. So again, on a competitive financial basis, that's where we're looking at, which, you know, should sound very familiar. Those are amounts that we've been saying for years are the amounts that we're not funding on things that we should be doing. The next bullet point is just, I know, I hear teacher salaries come up oftentimes. I just wanted to throw out there our FY12 to FY16 average teacher salaries. For Douglas, 66 $68,459. The average surrounding towns, $68,494. The average across the state, $73,538. Now, we shouldn't expect it to be competitive with the state average. There's a lot of Boston salaries there, which, cities would be much higher anyways. But you can't say that Douglas average teacher salary is really just high enough to be competitive with surrounding towns. So for any folks that, think that we're spending extravagantly on our salaries. My last section here, years of, so we've touched on all this. Just again, the constraints in our budget have led to the choice out. I put those numbers in a little bit of perspective here. So school choice pupils have grown 47 from 15 through 18. Kevin just touched on that. What that's meant from an expense growth is a plus $172,000 expense for school choice out on the town side. At the same time, school choice pupils in have dropped, but really the dollars of choice in have kind of stayed pretty level due to some increases in the choice in tuition per pupil, and I don't want to pretend that I understand how those choice in and choice out tuitions are calculated. And then just the last 5 years, total enrollment in BVT has grown 58% from 71 to 112. Again, we get some different numbers. It probably depends on where you pull them from. Kevin had 110.
Yeah, it depends upon the time of the year also when you get your information.
So,
Some cases.
during that time, BVT expenses to the town has grown 556,000. Grown from 556,000 to 1.2 million, I think is what we're expecting this year. $653,000 or 117% increase there. So, not having the consistency and stability in our schools is leading to a great deal of expense coming back on the town side, which then leads to inability to fund your schools, which
And be consistent.
the spiral we've been talking about. So getting back to Mike's point, despite everything above, I'll put our academic performance up against any school in the state. Ignoring budgets, we compare favorably to surrounding towns when it comes to performance in SATs, MCAS, AP exams, and college admissions. When you factor in budgets, I can't imagine there is a better academic bargain in the state than Douglas. We are highly competitive with the academic and extracurricular programs within the academic and extracurricular programs that we are able to offer. Where we fail competitively is with regards to the breadth of programs that we are able to offer due to financial constraints. Until this competitive disadvantage is remedied, we will continue to see a negative trend in enrollments and continue escalation of stress placed on municipal budgets by expenditures for students choosing to attend elsewhere.
By the way, I want to go on record and just say I appreciate this information. I've been asking for it a lot. It's some of the best information I've seen. It should make the town, the school district proud. These are great numbers. You said you've been pushing them a little bit. I'd like to see them more. I'd like to see them on the
I wanna
fire
be level
department
one,
notice
right.
sign. I'd like to see them
Flashing.
stapled
Yeah,
to pizza
I
boxes
actually
in
was gonna
town when
go
you
back
buy
to
a
the point
pizza and
here.
take it home.
Ke-
These are
Kevin
great
kinda
numbers,
skimmed over
guys.
it
Nice
during this
work, and I
meeting, but he
appreciate
touched
putting
on
it
it,
together, too. Nice
during-
work.
Thank you.
Sorry, I was talking over. One of the things that's in this packet is one of the things that we want to do. The district must drive community pride in its schools, our students, and its
That's right.
continued
Saw that.
support. I think we have some work to do, engaging the community. I think we've been doing a good job engaging our students.
Yeah.
There's a great deal of pride there. It's like, how do we start driving that out into the community is a takeaway for us.
Maybe placemats at the restaurants.
We charge for those.
I'm going to let the committee finish with their questions first, and I'm happy to take a couple from the
So I
audience.
think we're going over to Courtney now, I think.
So I didn't want to,
Sorry, Courtney,
I guess-
just 1 second. Does anyone
Oh.
else have a question on the 2-pager before we move on to the next?
No,
Okay.
but there is one page on Mr. Main's, the last page.
So we were gonna get to that.
We were going to get, we still are going to get to that, right?
Yes, we
That'll
are.
be part of this
Okay, is
discussion.
that,
That
is
was
that
part of this piece.
good? All right, is that happy
I thought you were gonna give that
stuff?
amount along with
Not
the.
No, I'm sorry, it's not
Okay.
there.
I'll just put that
Pass it
aside.
I'm actually apologize. I'm actually short one of those. I keep thinking you're a committee of 7 for some reason. I keep forgetting that. So I'm one short.
Well, I'm taking mine.
And this kind of marries, I think, a lot of what Kevin and Brett were saying. I think this one document here, and I'll go over it very quickly. And I've highlighted so we can just run through it very quickly. This is basically the FY17 actuals for 314 districts reporting. And I'm showing you, I'm actually highlighting and circling what you want to hone in on. So you have the amount over or under the required for FY17 actuals for Douglas was 316,737, which was, as was indicated earlier, 102.1%. Next page, it shows Northbridge at 105.2%, if we were at, what I did was I calculated what Douglas would be receiving for our school budget, that we could, talking about the marrying of the two, that we could utilize for that competitive, adding programs and maintaining students within our district. If we had Northbridge's 105.2%, that would be an additional $782,139 for Douglas. Go to the next page, Blackstone Millville, 109.9%. So 9.9% above net school spending. That would equate to $1,518,000. Grafton, 113.8%. That would equate to $2,116,376. Sutton, 114.6%. This is all actuals from the DESE website.
But Courtney,
Uh-huh.
you're saying if this was this,
More.
then we'd
Yeah.
have that. Well, it isn't, and we don't. And
No,
so-
no. All I'm saying is, all I'm trying to show you is that all the other area districts, their percentage over the, remember that the required, I think I want to remind everyone, I think this is a perfect place to remind everyone. The DESE minimum, the required net school spending is a minimum. It's a floor. It's a floor. So all I'm pointing out is that all these other area districts are far above and what the dollar amount would be that we would have in our budget in additional revenues.
So I
That's
touched
all
on
I'm
the
pointing
basis
out.
of the average of the surrounding towns. She was giving the details on each individual school, you know, within
Yeah,
that.
right.
Right, the additional revenue that Douglas would be receiving if we were at the same percentage above net school spending that all the other area towns are at. Because if you look at this document, and I'll just leave it with you, I'm not gonna go
I
through it
mean, you are
anymore.
aware that the only reason we're not funding schools more is because we don't have the funds to do
Oh, I
that,
understand
right?
that. I'm just saying that if we did
You're
have
just
the
making us
funds.
feel bad.
So if we
I mean,
did,
really.
if we did have the funds, this is what it would do, and it would go a long way to addressing all these other programs and remaining competitive. And again, and I know I hate to beat a dead horse, all these stopping the bleeding is also, it's not only helping the school district, it is helping all town departments, because it'll help with BVT, Norfolk Aggie, School Choice Out, which is a direct hit to the municipal side of government, also including all departments and the school department. And again, and just want to say too, that I said this at the department head meeting last week, I think it's also the community. You know, what kind of a community we want to have. It isn't just about the schools, or the library, or the town hall, or police or fire. It's about the community. You all represent your community, not just the schools. This isn't about just the schools. So I'm just pointing that out. I know that was about the school part, but I'm just trying to, show some comparison.
And
So
Cindy,
you can look at that if you like,
Your
some
point,
of
Tim, I don't think we're looking for a pity party here. That's
No,
what we
not
came
at
for.
all.
So,
That's not why we came,
We're
no.
not trying to guilt you. I think Cody was
Yeah.
trying to provide some additional details supporting stuff that me and Kevin had already talked about.
Because there are some out there.
We're all
Looking at
aware of
that, though,
that.
we're really comparing apples versus oranges. I mean, Douglas isn't really comparable to Sutton or Grafton. I mean, we don't have a Market 32 off of 146. We don't have a Walmart and a Shaw's or a Hannaford. I mean, you want to buy groceries in town, you got to go to one of
Or
the neighbors.
BJ's warehouse
But by
or,
the same
But
token,
they'll-
if,
But
the
it's
parents
pointing
and the
some
students
things out
looking
about
at our
diversified
offering.
tax base and things of that
by
nature
the same
too.
token, if you look
Right.
at the company that we're in on this list, we're not anywhere near those. I mean, you got Southern Worcester, New Bedford, Fall River,
Right.
Greater
I mean,
Lowell.
Yep.
We're
I mean, you're-
22nd lowest again,
these are-
in another ranking
Yep.
there in spending above.
Over
net school
required spending, right. We're not in good company on that list.
That's all that's what I'm trying to
And we're
point
not
out
even
is the
trying to be
difference.
average,
You're
you know.
doing more with less.
Yeah, we already said that.
Yes, and we
do, yeah.
we're doing I think we've done very well, but that hits a wall though at some point.
My question was gonna be,
That's
is
the
it
point.
sustainable, or are we looking at a potential, in fact, reversal of these numbers that just hasn't hit yet? Due to cuts, due to budget constraints, all the great numbers you've shown us in AP and all the other things, are we perhaps
gonna drop off.
not have, are we gonna drop off? Do we not have the data yet that's, something's coming that we don't see yet?
Excellent question.
Yeah, that
It's
is
the
an excellent
reverse.
point.
It's the reverse. Those numbers will drive the other numbers to come back.
Right.
No, I'm saying
as we-
because
as
of,
we shore up
But I think what
private.
you're saying is
Yeah.
if we continue to fall
If you
off the
keep
cliff a little bit
falling.
with the
Right.
budget, what would be the impacts? At some point,
Right.
obviously,
It was at the wall.
you can't continue to maintain all of that we're maintaining, and we are doing, we're doing it with MacGyver, we're doing with duct tape and
Right.
and
because if
bubble
you're
gum.
doing this
Bubbling well.
with a budget
Right.
that you shouldn't be able to do this with the
Right.
budget you have.
Right.
At some point, everything has to come back to an equilibrium. At some point, we have to come back to reality. So the extra effort that's being provided is eventually going to burn people out. Or so teachers who may be putting in much more time than they need to, or rather than they're required to, are eventually going to get burned out. And so these numbers will eventually take a hit.
But Eric, parents drive this. Parents of kids that are 2, that are reading to them at night and start to get those kids through 3, 4, and 5, and 8 and 10. Those people aren't burning out. That's what you said, the sense of our community. These numbers are driven by a community, not just our high school teachers or what money we're putting in. We're giving you good students, hardworking students with good student ideas and concepts. That's our investment that you guys are doing a great job with.
I want to come back to it, Eric, though. Your point is well taken. One of the conversations that was held about 3 years ago, when we were in some dire straits, was, are we going to let Rome burn? In other words, are we going to take the hit, take the $700,000 that we got to cut positions, cut programs, and just let it go? Because the argument that we often hear is that they always make it work. Well, the only option other than making it work is to let it burn, is to let it go to the ground. And that's not good for anybody in the community. It's certainly not good for our kids. And so your point is absolutely well taken, is that without some sort of increases, we've been perilous. I think we will be perilous again, and that will have the same impact of flight from the district.
Now you looked at all these potential things that you wanted to do for the high school, right?
Right.
So you have
all the schools, yes.
Right.
Yep.
Husbandry, sciences, agricultural, computer.
Yep.
Have you looked at, obviously, with the way our budget is now, we're never going to be able to fund all of them.
So
it would be the hope, but my question would be, have you looked at what would retain the most amount of students? What programs are most important in this list of potentials to retain?
Correct.
The
So
most
we would have
students?
to, again, as I mentioned earlier, the collaboration between the admin team would be that we would look to prioritize. If we're able to bring something back, what's first, what's second? We did the exact, I hate to say this, but we did the exact opposite drill 2 years ago and prioritized what goes first, what are we getting rid of second, what are we getting rid of third, what are we getting rid of fourth? And so that would be something that we would absolutely give consideration to.
And I just want to go back to your last question about potential slippage in performance. We actually, and we will speak in more detail, but we did see a slip in our MCAS math scores at the elementary level. Part of the reason we brought that Title I, math teacher in last fall is to have that Title I math teacher down in the primary school and elementary school to help put a stop to what we saw as the start of something that could turn bad for us there.
Another piece of that, what Brett is talking about, is that we also, at one point, were offering 2 maths at I forget what grade level it was, Cindy? 8th. We were offering 2 maths to support them, and we also had, we've never been able to get the Title I math into the budget. As much as we knew that we needed it, much like the adjustment counselor. We know we need an adjustment counselor at the high school. It does not get in because, again, we did the exercise. Do we need an extra math teacher, or do we need an adjustment counselor?
What exactly does an adjustment counselor do?
So an adjustment counselor is someone who would work with students who are having some social, emotional, or behavioral concerns. They would be a conduit to parents. They would be the person who is making connections with agencies to try to lend some additional support. They'd be that check-in person with the student and to find out how they're making out today, how are the grades coming along. They would be a support in that regard. So
and that's in addition to the psychologist.
So we have a psychologist that does most of the testing. She's not, and she also she is. She does everything. She at one point she was a guidance counselor, adjustment counselor, social worker, and a psychologist at one point.
Great.
Yeah, she just like.
So if we had all the money in the world, her job would be strictly testing, and then you would have an adjustment counselor who is really like your person you talk to.
Like a social worker type of thing, right?
Engagement with this particular instance, and outreach needed.
I think that it's really important to understand that that social emotional issues run the gamut of all students. There's a misperception out there that it's only this certain type of kids. It's every kid, from number one all the way down. And it is extremely prevalent in every district.
I know we talked a little bit before, I'm gonna jump in on Eric's question or point about the high school additional course offerings that we'd like to add to it. I think those are great. As opposed to maybe choosing, which ones do we implement, which ones do we not? Is there any opportunity to reach out to some of our neighboring schools, like Sutton or Uxbridge or, anywhere else and say, doesn't make sense for us to add, I'm just picking a name here, engineering, because we've only got 5 students that are interested in it, but maybe, there's 10 kids from over here, or 20, or however many, and maybe we could work together to figure out some type of a class schedule where Monday, Tuesday, they're here, Wednesday through Friday, they're elsewhere.
That goes to the collaborative program that I mentioned, that's sort of on the bedrock right now, but starting to build itself up. And we've been reaching out. Uxbridge is really trying to drive in that right now, Uxbridge and Northbridge, because they are both being adversely impacted by students going out to Norfolk and the impact that has financially on them. But also, they've reached out to other districts. I'm not sure, I have a meeting on Friday on this matter, so that is something that we are looking to do, and that's why I know that there's a link to UMass and also, I think it's Wachusett Regional, Wachusett Community, that they're trying to establish as well. So that is on the works.
I think if there's any opportunities,
I think you're talking about maybe a centers of excellence concept, where each school district has maybe a specialty.
The old term is magnet, I think, right?
Yeah.
Can I ask a couple questions about the budget itself and the development of it? I'm just trying to understand how it went about. So the positions that were added in the summer and the reduction of fees are included in the 2019 superintendent's proposed budget, correct?
Correct.
Now, are any of these wishes
Not
none?
one of them.
Oh, no.
That last page you were on?
That last page?
I was more talking about all throughout the budget where you wanted to add addition of one's special education or nothing. Okay.
Not one of those that we talked about, that I get a sense from the committee that they think makes good sense. Unfortunately, not one of those is slated to come on to the budget at all.
Okay.
Now, I don't wanna jump ahead, but I think it bears reiterating.
I'm sorry, can I finish, and then I'm happy to, okay. So it's more of an apples from what we had in the summer to what we have going forward, correct?
Yes.
Did you talk about last summer what kind of budget increase you were hoping to get this fiscal year? Because this proposed budget of 3.5%, I think, is very optimistic. I would say historically, if you look the last 3 to 5 years, it's been 1%, probably a little less increase. So I'm just trying to understand. I feel like if we were going for 3.5, that wasn't real realistic. And now, if you only get the average 1%, there may be some positions we had in the summer or things we had in the summer that we're not going to be able to keep. Can you just explain the thought process a little bit there?
So what we presented was level. This, in other words, we went forward with what was a level service. In other words, keeping everything that was in and all the staff that was in. And that's what we put together.
I think I get your point, Ryan. So by adding positions in August, September, we automatically jumped up 2%, let's say, from our FY17, FY18 budget, and then you go into FY19 if there's additions on top of that for increase in steps, COLAs.
I get that.
Yeah,
You end up at a 3.5% increase. So
Exactly.
I would say we didn't specifically talk about what do we think we're going to get for an increase coming into FY19. We did talk about whether it would be sustainable potentially through additional use, continued additional use, deeper use of school choice funds. And that's one of the things that we are now going to be looking at as a committee going forward, is
Along with cuts.
to make up, right now we have a gap of $650,000, $645,000 between the budget you see there in front of you and the allocation or the appropriation that we have from the town.
Right.
So we have to look there, how far can we go with additional school choice dollars in order to offset some of that.
Okay. Do you have some, Dark? Thank you.
Yeah, I think it bears repeating of, we come to this, what appears to be a cliff for the past couple of years, and then ultimately, we were lucky enough that the circuit breaker came in. So if you could just explain that process for, I guess, anybody watching who may not know, so we said, oh, it's going to be dire, we're going to lay off all these people, and then we got relief in some fashion, so we were able to keep level service or add a couple of teachers. So I guess it would just be helpful, perhaps, for some people to understand how that process happens and the uncertainty that lies with that process.
And there's a great deal of uncertainty. So first, I just want to say that it's really school choice that we were relying on, okay, with regard to the positions in the fall. It really had nothing to do with circuit breaker as far as...
You might be referring back to FY16 when the last override attempt was made, and it was very much doom and gloom, we ended up getting extraordinary relief that
yeah,
summer,
and I was going to
which
get to all of that, and kind of going through a story
But
here.
is that specifically what you're referring to? Okay.
Yep. So basically, whatever expenditures you have in a fiscal year, say for fiscal year 18, for what's eligible for circuit breaker, which is basically, is mostly going to be tuitions, because there's a foundation amount that comes off, and it's based on each student individually. So say you have student AB, and they're at a school that costs $200,000. Roughly $40,000 comes off of that. It's called the foundation amount, which comes to a net eligible amount, and then the state will give you reimbursement in the following year of the law says they're required to give a 75%. They've only done that once in the past, I believe, 10 years. So say between 65 to 75% of that. That revenue comes in the following year. DESE also allows you to carry over 1 year your revenues received in a year. And the only reason I'm bringing giving you the background of the law is because the idea from DESE's standpoint is to allow for some financial flexibility to deal with special ed tuitions predominantly that come in that you never know. Day to day, you don't know what's going to happen. That being said, over the years, we have always been utilizing circuit breaker, along with school choice and some other revolving funds such as preschool, but the predominant ones are circuit breaker and school choice. We have been using circuit breaker to offset our general fund budget with regard to special ed tuitions. It does vary greatly from year to year. For instance, currently we have students that are costing $460,000 for 2 students. So basically $230,000 tuition. It's going to drop off next year, so that expenditure will drop off, but to a large amount of revenue will drop off in that following year. So there are, to your point, some ebbs and flows.
You say next year, FY20.
FY20, yeah, because there's 19 budget that we're talking about, yep. So, I just lost my train of thought. Darn. I'm sorry? I don't know if that's going to help. Okay, extraordinary relief. Extraordinary relief, you have to be 125% more than your expenditures from the prior year to get any extraordinary relief, number one. Number two, it's highly contingent upon, it's subject to appropriation. So it all depends on how much they have left over after their regular circuit breaker, just like everything else, those 3 magic words, subject to appropriation. And it also depends, what you get depends on what all of the various districts throughout the entire state of Massachusetts submit to DESE. So you can never foresee, number one, if you're going to receive any extraordinary relief, and also what the dollar amount will be. So essentially, the reason I bring that up, to your point, is we can never come forward and tell the finance, that would be extremely irresponsible, and if I did that, I should be fired the very next day. And Jean Lovett would agree with that. But you can never say that you're going to get even $1, whether you're going to get any, or to what extent. So yes, it is true, there was a couple of years, and I actually have the trend from going back, I don't know how many years, trying to see when my circuit breaker is here. I've got so many documents here, it takes me a minute to find them.
So while she's looking at that, so on regular circuit breaker.
No, that's them, no.
When you're budgeting, you
But thank
don't
you.
know if you're getting 65% reimbursement or 75% reimbursement, so you'll tend to, you're gonna budget at 65%. If you get extra, that's great. On extraordinary
Right.
release, you don't know what, you might not get anything, you don't know you qualify if they don't appropriate any money towards it, so.
Okay. Actually, where is that document? No, I've got two documents here. So actually, just to, while I have this in front of me, since 2008 through FY '18, the percentage reimbursement rate has been anywhere, remember the law says 75%? It's been anywhere from 42.34% to 75%. Again, when you're talking about a large dollar amount in special ed tuitions or even eligible expenditures, that's a huge difference. So you cannot rely. That's why even Mrs. Urquhart and I, we kind of tag team at the school committee meetings, and we do stress, and you can attest to that, about being prudently conservative with regard to that.
So the state's not
As far
paying
as-
the percentage that they should? on that?
Correct.
There are times when they don't.
And
they're
most of the
hoping-
time.
more often than
Most of the time, they don't. They haven't.
Well, they
and
don't help with the certainty they're
Exactly.
looking, that the
Right.
school's looking
That
for,
you can- yeah.
certainty.
That you know what
Exactly.
you're gonna get.
Yeah,
'Cause you know.
sustainability.
And that happens later.
And then they also hose us on the land as well, so.
So our last 10 years, we have received extraordinary relief in 4 out of those 10 years. Okay, and again, it's all dependent on the expenditures, the threshold, and you can never know. People can move in and out. You know, a student can be in your district, you've counted it in your budget, they could move out, and it changes your whole budget,
So you said
so,
it was 125% to qualify
over the prior year.
over the prior year. Now, that is also an uncertainty, right? That's hard to predict.
Oh, you
that
can't
change.
predict that. You have to
Because-
wait until the end of the year to see.
Because it's due to
Mm-hmm.
different contributing factors, special education, multiple different factors that occur throughout the school year, and so it's very hard to predict that as well.
It's very hard to budget for all those things as well, because you just never know what's gonna happen.
I originally asked Ryan about spending maybe another 20 minutes doing a whiteboard exercise, talking about all this stuff, but I decided that, yeah. I'd be happy to sit with any of you afterwards, or another day you want to schedule some time, so we can do that, but yeah, that would have been real nice.
Courtney, is special ed transportation, an increase in special ed transportation, is that eligible for circuit breaker?
No.
No.
No. And you cannot use school choice or circuit breaker revenues to pay for special ed education or any transportation, whether it be regular ed transportation or special ed transportation. Just to give you an idea, we have our preliminary FY19 circuit breaker reimbursement, the preliminary calculations. As far as the expenditure, just to give you the range that foundation budget amount, what we're estimating at about 43,094. It ranges from let's see, the lowest here is 50,763, all the way up to 257,620. That's individual student expenditures. So there's quite a range. It can change dramatically each year.
Did you say the enrollment went down this year?
It's been going down,
It's still
the
going
last
down,
number
so-
of years, yes.
Does it look like it will
Most-
continue to do that?
Most districts are seeing that as well.
Yeah, and it's a statewide, that is a statewide issue as well.
Yeah, so it's a combination overall demographics as well
That's
as
what- yeah.
the choice
The
of
financial.
housing situation.
Mm-hmm.
I would like to wrap this up because we have BBT. I did say I would take questions from the audience. I do ask that they are questions, not comments. We have our public hearing on April 10th. I believe you guys have a public hearing as well.
April 4th.
April 4th, so that would be the time for comments. Does anyone in the audience have a question? Oh, okay. Does anyone else at the table have a question?
Has the school finished their presentation?
I believe they have.
The only thing was the
Well, I
the
did,
numbers,
the only thing
right.
I did want to say
Okay.
is, as far as the specifics regarding the FY19 budget, as you know, when you have it in front of you, the preliminary proposed level service budget was $13,323,523. To come down to the figure that was provided to us at this point, it will be a reduction of $643,670. I can tell you this evening about all I can say, because we have a school committee meeting on Wednesday evening, to present to them, is that we feel it will definitely be a combination of increased use of fund balance and also certainly reductions to come to that number. And we will come to that number, of course.
I did have one question about.
Sure.
His building facilities management, that's separate from the town's building and facility management, is that correct?
Yes, we have our own facilities manager,
And they
that's
couldn't
correct.
be covered by, would it be too much for one person to cover?
Meaning,
Town
well,
and school.
I can tell you, our facilities manager works, if he doesn't work 60 hours a week, you know, yeah, we have a lot of,
At the
Yeah.
town level, we don't have enough building, we could use a
Right,
separate
'cause
position.
we're-
Sure.
yeah.
For building
Adam's
purposes.
doing
Yeah.
everything, so I was just wondering if it's, sometimes it's easier to combine
Yeah.
services. Like, you have a very large technology, but I know they're very busy with the technology in the school by itself. Could you not also maybe, since the town doesn't really use that much technology, tack on the town side,
Yep.
but there's a,
Yeah, so we reduced our technology.
Yeah, we've been
department,
reducing,
and never-
reducing.
have
And
never been
custodial.
reinstated. We reduced our
Use a
custodial
custodial.
staff by 1.5.
We have, I forget how many acres we maintain, and we have a
20
.5 person, it's an
27
enormous
acres.
amount of acres, I mean, it's just, yeah. We also have a lot of facilities use, because as you know, when we built school projects, the incentive was to have, and that actually costs funds too out of our school budget, and
And
never mind the time, and,
I think that the very last point to make is that the appropriation, again, that's been presented to us is gonna be dangerously close to net school spending minimums, once again. They can't actually calculate it until they know what kind of cuts we might make in order to meet the budget, but, we're gonna be right on that line again.
But we will meet that number, and whatever it takes to get to that number, we'll live within that number.
within our appropriation part of it, right.
And the Douglas students will be well educated.
They will.
And the program
do
will
well.
stay stable.
But but again, none of what we presented
I understand.
will come into fruition.
Anyone else?
Thank you very much this evening.
Thank you
Thank
for
you
the
very much for your
opportunity to
time.
talk with you.
Really appreciate the information.
Very helpful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are we ready to move on, or does the kid committee need a couple-minute break? Are we ready to move forward?
Move
I'm
forward.
fine. Yeah.
You're on your own then. All right. No problem. I'd like to call Dr. Fitzpatrick, Mr. Lavin, and anyone else from BBT up to the table.
They're here.
Charts to them. I like it.
I see, I knew you could print some stuff for us.
First of all, my apologies on being late. On some important issues for the town, and again, my apologies for being late.
We understand that fully. I'm joined this evening by long-term school committee members, John Lavin, who I trust.
I'm
you know well.
Thank you again.
And actually, my long-term assistant superintendent principal, who wanted to see this process. So this is Anthony Steele.
Good
Welcome.
evening. Thank you.
Let's go around the room and introduce ourselves, just so everyone knows.
Sure,
Right
Pam
here.
Holmes.
Mike Hutnick?
Ryan Hogan.
Howard D'Amico.
Cindy Sherrick.
Prior to this, certainly I invited the new town administrator, Matt, to visit, tour the school, which he did.
Okay.
And then shared advance, call it, placement information relative to a number of factors as they unveiled themselves. The first was the significant increase in Douglas's enrollment in our system with a very robust application pool. And subsequent to that, an estimate of the assessment impact, which was certainly considerable. And subject to that, when the state numbers came out and then the school committee concluded their public hearing, certified information for the warrant, which I trust you have, you usually do at this point, that separated the assessment now voted and the debt in its 14th year. I'd like to encourage the board and anyone who is observing our meeting to recognize that Blackstone Valley Tech is Douglas's other school. We're not something outside of the district, and Douglas came together some 53 years ago with 12 other communities to create an effective additional option for in the category of vocational technical education. That partnership has borne dividends during all 53 years. and anyone who might look at the requests that we make in any given year should be aware that the average per pupil tuition cost to send a student to a vocational technical school in Massachusetts is roughly $16,500 plus transportation. Douglas enjoys a rate which we can identify in just a moment, but a number considerably less than that for each of the students that are enrolled. I also was made aware by the town manager that there was specific questions that this body had hoped that I would address tonight, and I'll be glad to do that in any sequence which you would prefer.
Okay.
The budget is on the website, and it's put forth in the documents that were just distributed for those who wanted a printed copy. This was, as it's been done annually, printed by our students in graphic communications and other learning opportunity. With your permission, I'll walk through the budget item itself.
That'd be great.
Okay. The budget subcommittee is listed in the inside page there. It's a cross-representation of the school committee, administrative team, our treasurer, and certainly good representation from the budget business manager. The budget committee met 9 times in publicly posted session, kept minutes of those meetings, and had a very active, development in the budget as it's done annually. The second page, as you're flipping through, which has been my practice for 25 years, is to provide each of the finance committees, we have 126 of them, that with a letter highlighting some of the major changes that are put forth in the budget, which are now advanced as voted by the regional school committee. Some of the points that are made in the document is that this budget request is a 4.74 increase, one of the largest that I've had in my 25 years. And I asked each of the towns to recognize that over the past 9 years alone, there have been budget increases as low as 1.65. The district makes a single, one-time request and handles all expenses. We have no municipality partner in that regard to share costs, from snow removal to unemployment costs, anything else. So we must include those, and we do. We build our budget primarily on forecasted information, particularly the governor's numbers. Like school systems across the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, the governor was particularly conservative in estimating how many Chapter 70 base aid dollars could be provided to school systems. Like most, although we benefit from a higher total number of dollars because we meet the Chapter 74 high standards of vocational technical education, we received $20 more per student, which is not much. My letter references the challenges that educators across our state face. The federal government has significantly reduced its subsidies to the state. The state has significantly reduced its subsidies to the local, and that's resulted in a regional school such as yours placing a greater expectation of the communities to fund the cost. The state of Massachusetts is now looking at a handful of revenue streams to move forward. The state has acknowledged that the absolute minimum contribution, also now being called the preliminary contribution at the state level, does not meet the inflationary cost of several categories, particularly health insurance and special education costs. So there's been an acknowledgement by the state that it doesn't do that, but there's been a reluctance by the state so far to identify, say, new taxes or new approaches that would increase the revenue. There have been several study commissions. I participate actively in various organizations to influence those study commissions. And there is hope and optimism that down the road, unless a court case has to drive it, that there'll be increased state aid and new revenues. At the current time, the state of Massachusetts is looking at additional money that might be driven from the marijuana referendum implementation. We've yet to see that. They're looking to see that there be additional money generated by the casinos that have been provided or otherwise committed, like in Everett. We have yet to see that. There's a recent legislative action to tax short-term housing and temporary kinds of arrangements. We'll have to see what that brings. There is some plan to consider any additional revenue generated by legalized gambling, if that happens. So Massachusetts is at least exploring options to create some additional revenue streams, and it definitely will need to do that to move forward. When I started 25 years ago as your vocational technical superintendent, the state subsidized 75% of the cost of the education at BVT, which meant that Mr. Randor at the time and I, when we came forward to you here, we only were looking for the 25% maximum across the 13 towns. It wasn't a tough sell because it was primarily supported by the state. Now, in the FY19 budget, we're experiencing pretty much a 40% subsidy from the state and a 60% dependency by the locals. And frankly, it looks like it's headed for the very opposite that it was when I first started 25 years ago, kind of a 75% expectation from the communities and a 25% from the state, unless new revenue streams are identified and then realized. We will do everything we can to secure any additional money to maximize any dollar that's invested. The district, once again, drew upon $250,000 of its excess and deficiency. Some would use the analogy of free cash in our situation. The Department of Revenue has once again certified our excess and deficiency or reserve account. The number was provided, and it is $657,999. I'll round that off to $658,000. We're allowed to keep a 5% reserve, which is going to be closer to $1.2 million, and so we're well within the window. I wouldn't say this is perilously low, but it's reasonable. And I would like to also point out that we are among the rare school systems in Massachusetts that have funded its own roof repair projects and not asked the town traditionally for additional bonding money. But we have met the requirements of the Mass School Building Authority in order to receive at least 53 cents, 53%, 53 cents on a dollar back to allow us to continue to get something back, to be able to replenish, if you will, the excess and deficiency to move forward. Over the past, yes, Ron.
One quick question. The 658 and the excess and deficiency?
Yes.
Is that before or after you've taken the 250 out for fiscal 19?
To the best of my knowledge, that's before it's taken out.
Before it's taken out. So as the budget starts, you'll actually be closer to 400,000.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Which has been a practice that we've used over the past 15 years.
Okay.
Okay, but we do target it to do the best we can to replenish it.
Yep.
The letter also references the fact that your regional vocational technical is 53 years old, okay, and that but we've received acclaim and compliments for the manner in which we protect the building. We have the rare advantage of having vocational technical students and staff. They can do things that a traditional school would not be able to do, but it allows us to maintain the building and create many on-campus learning. In addition, the district has also utilized its students and vocational staff to do projects in the communities, working with the neighboring school systems and also with our towns. There's been some conversation in the past about how we identify alternative ways of raising money. I wanted to share this. This is an example of. I've reached out to the area banks throughout the district and actually on the peripheral of the district, and have at least 6 to 8 commitments each year in the amounts of $3,500 to $5,000. What we do with donations of this nature is complement the investment we ask the towns to make. Otherwise, the banks and the other agencies wouldn't do that. Thanks, John. Okay, this money is used mostly for the gas and maintenance of the vehicles we use. Now, the vehicles in turn are used either for sports activities, which reduces the cost of transportation for sports and actually the sports themselves, and for the sports that are suitable to that. And throughout the school day, in the 193 teaching year that we provide, the vans are very visible, making trips throughout the district to the nursing homes and hospitals and senior centers and the elementary schools and many other projects. This is an example of kind of the unique way in which we can raise money, which we constantly do. On the other hand, if any member of the committee has additional suggestions, we'll be glad to pursue those. Okay, and even the vans themselves, in some cases, have been acquired via grant money. Now, a vocational technical school is entitled to compete for grant money that, again, most schools could not. So I'd like to point out some of the differences. In any case, my letter attempts to summarize some of the new changes. In addition, each of the 25 years that I've had an opportunity to serve as your vocational superintendent, we have provided an annual report on a calendar basis, again, printed by our students, that provides kind of a prospectus. This is what we did with the money that you gave us along with the other 12 towns. And so, I believe you have some of these, but if anyone else needs them, we have additional copies.
Okay.
If there are no questions, I'll move on.
Anyone? Okay, good.
The next section is the green sheet, the revenue, which is rather lean, to say the least. The state aid number is there. As a regional school, we are fortunate to be eligible to access regional transportation, one of the few incentives that remains other than the discount of the consortium itself. We have built in. I have commitments from our legislative contingent. We have 5 state reps and 2 state senators that they have received my letters lobbying for additional money for Chapter 71, the regional transportation. We hope that that is something that can be achieved. Right? So we have a conservative number in here, kind of like a 65% reimbursement. I think people are aware that under the rules in Massachusetts, regional transportation is designed to be at 100% reimbursement, but subject to appropriation. So you seldom see the full. The lobbying effort last year brought another $1 million into the Chapter 71 account across the state, divided by all the regional schools. Wasn't a great deal, but it was still helpful. The other revenue streams are identified. As I mentioned, the total budget increase is 4.74 to meet all our obligations and to continue to advance the system to have the same impact which it's had previously. Questions on the revenue sheet? Moving forward. The back side of the revenue sheet is our auditor has strongly recommended that we be particularly transparent in the manner in which we utilize the excess and deficiency account. No excess and deficiency money has been spent in my 25 years that hasn't been advanced in this fashion and then posted on our school committee agenda and voted by the school committee. So, so that it's intentionally a transparent process, as it should be. Right? So we do want to make sure that we point out that is the manner in which we hope to use some of the funds to get through FY19. The next sheet is the specific.
Could I just ask a question, Dr. Fitzpatrick? Is it possible that you could provide us with the expenditures for the prior year? It would be, so for FY, we're in 18, FY17, the amount and the type of expenditures that were used for, with E&D funds.
Absolutely. Okay.
I think that would be appropriate, frankly. Because you give us this disclosure every year,
right?
That you be aware that we can do this, but I think that a full disclosure by showing us after the fact what you've done with them would be good.
No problem at all. In
Thank
fact,
you.
You're going to find some cross-reference in the report of the kinds of changes that are made, but it's not done in an auditing fashion.
Okay.
Keep in mind, the FY19 budget is for forward thinking. It's not an audit of previous activity.
Sure. Well, as an additional document, then I'd like to request it for Douglas to get.
Glad to provide it, as I provided in any other questions that you've raised previously. The next sheet is the breakout, okay, relative to the budget as it spreads across the 13 partners. And you can see that Douglas owns roughly 9% of its vocational technical school based on this current situation. And the numbers that are identified here as far as the total impact of the assessment and the debt have been shared, as I mentioned, in advance. The total budget increase that we seek is $252,003. That has not changed since the information that was forwarded to the town manager. Right. So the Douglas exempted the debt that it approved along with the other 12 communities unanimously 14 years ago. And so that number is separated for the warrant purposes, but is also inserted.
Question on the debt, when will that be rolling off?
14 more years.
14 more years?
I'm sorry, no, it's 14 years deep, so 6 more years.
Yeah, okay.
It's actually 6 and a little bit more, because there'd be a residue, so I'll say 6.5.
Residue, huh?
Well,
I
I'm
don't
saying
like
it's not,
I don't like residues.
well, you still have to meet the payments. Okay. Last time I looked. What's that?
Let's keep moving.
That's it. There's a very, I don't know exactly how much, but it's not fully paid off in the 20th year. There's a little additional payment that has to be met, okay? Keep in mind, we received 75.5% reimbursement from the state, and we returned money when we did this.
Doctor, on this blue page.
Yes.
It's got a column, project ownership and percentages. Are those set percentages that never change, or those change according to enrollment?
They do not change, Howard.
What are they calculated on?
They're calculated on the 3 years of the average enrollment at the time in which the debt was voted by the town.
Okay.
And it's an interesting point to make.
So for this debt, they don't change?
That's
but
correct.
Those percentages of ownership of the district, if you will, do change?
That's
based on-
correct.
All right.
You're right on target, okay? I guess, the life was easier when we only referred to the regional agreement process, and the state wasn't involved in setting the ability to pay stuff, which shows up on the pink sheet. This one is nice and clean, the 3-year average, but it is a 20-year identified,
Sure.
not a variable. After 10 years, we refinanced to save, and there was considerable savings at the time. Does that answer your question?
does. Thank you.
Okay. The next pages, you get into the state's line item budgets relative to the specific items. This budget includes 3 new positions, all right? It's a fairly common question that's been raised across the Finance Committee presentations. We have more students again, and in fact, I was asked a question about enrollment trends, and I'll share this trends across a long-term period in just a moment.
Great.
But in any case, we have 13 additional students in the total enrollment from the previous year. We've had an increase in our students in the last 20 years, every year. Okay. Now, sometimes a very modest increase, right, given the fact that we don't really have a lot of empty space. But there are 3 new FTEs, or full-time equivalents. Those positions are an additional art teacher, recommended by the advisory committees in the sense of the different STEM and STEAM programs, the science, technology, engineering, arts, and mathematic considerations, and the 21st century skills that the employers are looking for in our students. There is a one-on-one aid, given the unique special need considerations that must be addressed in IEP for one of the district-wide students. And there is a secretarial position. The secretarial position was previously eliminated 2 years ago, and we tried our best, with the help of the cooperation of the principal, to have a variety of people fill in. That didn't work well relative to the filing of reports and some of the other things with the state. So the school committee has voted to restore that position. Those are the 3 new positions. The major increase of the budget of the 4.74 is driven by insurance of the 5,000 series, and there are descriptions in each of the breakouts.
Okay.
Okay. The rest of the booklet, it has narrative descriptions for each of the categories that describe. The total increase is the 4.74, and then in the back you're going to find some of the sample information of the fact that we have an all-inclusive budget, as we must, in that whether it be snow removal or anything else, it's got to be in our budget. And then some of the grants, again, but in fairness, I like to point out that as a vocational technical school, we're oftentimes eligible for money that not everyone would be eligible. Even the federal government just passed in the Perkins Law some additional money for vocational technical education. The governor has periodically introduced some special incentive money. We've chased it wherever possible. Whenever we can ask you for $1 and then add additional dollars, our view is that if we don't chase it, somebody else will, and it's a way of complementing and adding to the resources at Douglas's Vocational Technical School. There were specific questions
I have
that,
a general question about your salaries. What is your COLA for this year? How did you approach salaries?
the salary increases here, it's a 2.2, I want to make sure I give you the correct number. It's the second year of the teachers, 2.25, okay? And I want to check the current change in the health benefits, but when I started, it was 90-10, and the school committee has been chipping away at that each year. Remember what the final number was? I'm going to say it's like,
72?
yeah, I think it was 72%. That's the number I was going to use. Might be 72.5, but 72, I believe.
Keep chipping
I can double check that for you too, if you like.
Steps as well?
Oh, the contract includes steps and levels, that's correct. The 2.25 is the base salary raise, okay? We do have a lot of staff at the senior level, so they're not, you know,
Are your steps equalized throughout a document, or do they change? So if someone went one step up, is it a set percentage?
I think the best way to do this, that's a whole table.
Yeah.
Okay, I think the best would be to provide you a copy of the contract where you could look at the steps and levels. Because you move across, okay, all right.
It changes?
Well, also the credential changes as well as experience changes.
Sure.
So, but it might,
I mean, I think we've got the same thing,
it's very
essentially.
common. It's recommended strongly by both the unions, state
Sure.
unions, to do
Yeah.
it that way.
Yeah.
It's certainly controversial, and, you know, by
sure.
many. But I think the best way to do that is provide you a copy
Sure, that would be
of
good.
the schedule.
Thank you.
Because you're going to see the specific increments. Are there another question? If I'll get into the Q&As that I was
Sure.
alerted, that you have.
That's great.
I think everybody has those, Ryan. Okay, the first one was, there was a request to look at some of the post-secondary placements over the past 5 academic years. I have to say, my own personal view is that students who leave us and pursue further education are not really being placed. It's kind of their exit plan, because college is not a permanent thing, right? But employers, we have 500 employers, okay, and we have, you know, like 40% of our senior class are in cooperative education. Let me point out, our instruction is normally 1 week of shop with integrated academics, followed by a week of academics with integrated vocational. So in the senior year, you know, in the week which those seniors with that level of experience under their belt would report to their shop area, you know, roughly 4 out of 10, I think it's a fair estimate, and it grows, report to industries. Okay, to earning at least minimum wage, and we monitor what they're doing out there so we can follow the competencies. So nobody's like sweeping the floor or something, unless it's your turn to sweep the floor, I guess. But that is my personal view, that I'm not looking at this as a placement, but at the exit level, okay, I wanted to share this.
Okay.
So I reference here that in my description that roughly some 70% are pursuing 4-year colleges. Another 15% are headed to 2-year colleges, higher certification opportunities, and some 4% enter apprenticeship programs. That's all referenced in my introductory paragraph. I'd like to point out, though, what we've discovered based on our conversations, we have not yet invested, as some of the VOCTEC schools have, in elaborate surveying studies done 4 to 6 years out. Our conversations with colleagues is they're paying somewhere between $25,000 and $30,000 to agencies to do this, and so we're trying to build our own through alumni data collection, but we haven't appropriated that money to do it in that manner. But we do maintain regular contact with graduates and others, and of course, it's interesting when you have something like Griffin Electric. Mr. Griffin, Wayne Griffin, is a VOCTEC graduate, not of Valley Tech, but of another VOCTEC system. He takes every student we can give him, every graduate, and this is not uncommon. And that the vast majority of our students use the trade that they pursued at Valley Tech or studied, as an alternative way to raise money to help pay for their college education along the way. Right? And so we're witnessing more and more. Also, many of the students do not arrive with any plan to pursue college, don't even have the confidence to do that, or even the sense that they could afford it. But when they have greater contact with the trades and the employers encourage them to expand their opportunities and to do things. And they gain more and more confidence while they're with us, too. Also, because employers are so eager to recruit Douglas Voc-Tech graduates of BVT and those of our other 12 towns, we have now been able to award, last year alone, $4 million in scholarships at a time when I think everyone everywhere is more and more concerned about the financial implications, if you will, and impact of college debt, which is obviously staggering. Now, I was asked to provide specific information relative to, which is put forth in Appendix A, the very next page. What colleges and universities were attended by the Valley Tech Douglas graduates? So you have a subset here of a page and a half, if you will, of Douglas-specific graduates over the past 5 years. We thought it also helpful, and since we were doing this for you, because you asked for it, a complete list of Valley Tech graduates across 5 years, which would really be, over 1,400 graduates. And this is where they're pursuing further education. There's some concern raised that, the issue of preparing colleges. Our experience has been that our students do well in college relative to completion and survival and persistence, I guess, perseverance, and that they almost, in the vast majority of conversations, they then use their trade, okay, as an option, an affiliation connection. This would mean that the students that are leaving at the end of a school year to immediately enter the workforce, which is not a high percentage because so many want to pursue college and they're on a part-time basis for the industry. They join the graduates who now have additional credentials who graduated 4 years ago, who are not going. So that there's a convergence, if you will, of talent that is being provided, and it has advanced skills. I hope that that's response to the question relative to some of the placement. The next question I had was one about historical enrollment trends. The yellow sheet describes the full enrollment at Blackstone Valley, at your vocational technical school from 2007 to 2017. We would, it shows the continuous growth, okay? The application interest in coming to Valley Tech is off the charts. It is clearly one, if not the most popular school system in Massachusetts, and we're glad that Douglas is very much part of it. So people don't leave Douglas if they go to BVT, because we are your other school.
Would you anticipate these trends? So essentially, if you go by this year's numbers, you've almost increased by 200 students over the last 10 years.
Okay.
Right? So, as you know, we've had several discussions about the increased enrollment at Douglas. So even on a flat trajectory, we'd expect an additional 15 to 20 students approximately to go to BVT just with this enrollment, with this being the only factor, all else being equal.
Over 10 years.
Over 10 years.
Yes, it's a fair conclusion. The concern we have, okay, is that we're being encouraged, sometimes by the incentive money provided by the governor, by our conversations with the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, by the success of our programs in industry, to continue to tweak the offerings. And what we've tried to do in some cases, years ago, machine shop was a separate program, welding was a separate program, and sheet metal was a separate program. Now industry has said, no, we can't hire 3 different people to do that. We want you to meld them, pardon the pun there, but I'm saying combine those so that a student receives skill sets in each, and probably some drafting too. And so we continue to make changes of that nature. The most popular program in the school right now is health assisting. And when we saw the opportunities from everything from dietary to so many, the aging population and so many students having interest in pursuing health occupations, where we saw a decline was in the electronics program that needed a lift, and the electronics program was primarily subsidized, as the machine shop was, with federal subsidies, like oscilloscopes and things of that nature, and Heath kits and things like that. And so there was a employment shift in the opportunity for the electronics program that we were offering. Doesn't mean electronics per se, but the one we were preparing for. So in the same manner which we made changes with manufacturing, that we repositioned the laboratory space, which was much larger for electronics, and reconfigured that in the summer, doing our own work, to move the health program there and invite anyone to come see it, okay? And then transition the health program into the former, anyway, we switched the programs, allowing more square footage for the program that had greater placement opportunity. And this is a constant activity that we're doing. It's in a sense of modifications. So some of this may not necessarily drive significant increases in students, but reconfigure what we do with the students. The other factor, Ryan, is that it's quite clear that, and certainly superintendents across the district, I've had a chance to work with 82 superintendents during the 25 years I've served as your vocational technical superintendent in the district, but there is a decline in students, okay, across the district. Okay, with rare exception. I think Grafton is one of the few communities that has an increase in birth. So we want to be a good partner in that process. So we're going to have to continue to look to see how we can advance, meet rigorous standards, still provide a quality workforce, but find ways in which we can be sensitive to, I won't say not a dwindling, but a reduced number of students that are across the 11 feeder districts. So that's going to be a challenge for us and a challenge for the superintendents.
So you're in my seat over here where I'm trying to project costs going forward. Would you expect in 2027 you're going to go from, what's the number, 1244? Will you, 1240, would you expect you'd have 1,440 students then? I mean, is there any way to, for us to get an understanding of what kind of projection we're looking at going forward? I know this is not the only factor, but it's certainly a very big factor.
I think a 1,400 total student population for Valley Tech would have been a reasonable goal had the numbers continue to go in the trend of increasing. But there's a new factor, that there are fewer kids, okay? So we have a new challenge, okay? And we're looking at enrollment studies, not just in our system, but across all 12 school systems. Right? So we're going to have to sit down. I mean, the area superintendents, including yours, meet monthly, take a bits, have conversations, see what we can do to share or help each other or resolve an issue or even, address a loss if that happened. Okay, so all I'm saying is a new challenge, a new factor, a new criterion is there are fewer kids. So we're not going to ignore that. Right. That would not be fair to ignore.
But it sounds like you still are looking to make more creative solutions to allow you to take more students. Would that be an accurate assessment?
Well, we're pretty much maxed. I'm saying we grew. You can see the trend even in this report. Okay, some of the year changes is fairly. It's a handful of students, not a big swing.
I hear you, but the trend is pretty straight up the line there. It's a pretty direct trend. It's not like you go up 20, then you go down 10, and then, I mean, it's almost an increase every year. So, again, we're just trying to get a sense on this side of the table as we're forecasting costs going forward. It sounds like you are still, even though you're limited with space, you gave us kind of some creative solutions you did there to allow more people to come into the programs. It sounds like you're going to pursue that going forward. Maybe at a lesser rate because of the birth rate, the decreased birth rate.
I mean, I'm more than willing. You have to forecast next year, and most people a challenge to do that. Yep. And you asked me a year ago whether or not there would be an increase in students, and I said yes, I would prepare for that.
Yes,
okay,
and
I think that clearly happened. Okay, although we don't get involved in admissions, so I just want to temper the growth. We have over 800 applications for the freshman class. Okay.
Okay.
Again, right, and so. The interest in coming was driving a willingness to say yes to more. Okay? And so, but the new development is a greater awareness of the birth rates being substantially less
Okay.
than they were for many years. And with the exception of Grafton, one of our communities, it looks like, they're on the decline. So we want to be a good partner in that process. So we have another wrinkle, another consideration that needs to come into play while we continue to strengthen what we do.
Okay,
And I'm not exactly sure how that's going to play out.
fair enough.
But okay, fair enough?
Yep.
Douglas enjoys, or whatever, the 5th lowest per pupil assessment. Let me point that out, because that's one of the things that we asked Douglas for $10,408 for each of its students, which is substantially less than what those students, the financial impact the town would experience if those students were pursuing a vocational technical education outside of your partnership at Blackstone Valley Tech with the other towns. The last sheet is just a summary of, again, kind of some of the return on investment. I thought it best to compare us against other VOTEC schools, and only other VOTEC schools. So this sheet attempts to do that. The first one is the dropout rates. Across the state of Massachusetts, the vocational technical schools enjoy, as pointed out, a 0.8% dropout rate. Douglas's VOTEC school enjoys a 0.1%. Okay, it's on the top of the charts. All right. The graduation rates across the vocational technical schools in the 2016-17 cycle, the data from the state reports that 95.6% for all VOTEC schools. Douglas's VOTEC, 99.3%. Completion rates, right? Once again, state level, 97.5%. Douglas VOTEC school, 100%. The MCAS scores against all VOTEC schools positions us #1 in the state. Some of the points here, we just received recognition that we're one of 2 schools in Massachusetts for its engineering Project Lead the Way program. And our students are headed off to compete in a variety of competitions, including certainly Douglas students. Consistent with the $4 million that was awarded last year in scholarships, 75 Valley Tech students were named Abigail Scholarship winners, which is a free college tuition, and for those who wish to pursue a college of that nature. Yes.
Michael,
Howard.
can I interrupt you?
Fire away.
The 4 million number.
Yes.
Is that received and used or just offered?
Awarded.
Got it.
Okay, yeah, good point. That also means that the student, but we do what we can to follow up. But usually the families, yeah, I think you're a father, so you know how families help with this stuff. The accreditation.
I've got where your number comes from. I got it.
The accreditation report, when we received the standard accreditation visit, when the accreditation team left, they asked us to present at their best practice. So couldn't get much more of a compliment. And earlier today, 102 students competing at the district level in the Skills USA competitions, which is everything from cooking to welding to you name it, took away district medals, which is an all-time high for the school system. Those are samples. So I hope that the data sheets responded to the questions that you made me aware. And I'll follow up with the teacher schedule and a delineation of how the previous E&D money was spent at the school committee voted process.
Okay. Does anyone have questions? I have a few. You got a few?
I have a few.
Why don't you go for it? Yeah, you can take the lead.
All right. So, Michael, a couple of things. I heard you, I took some notes. Douglas has 2 schools, right? The Douglas Public School, and you perceive BVT as Douglas's second school. We want to be a good partner with the schools. Something that one of the other members asked, and you said that would not be fair. We want to be a good partner. I guess my question is, of the 13 districts, for next fiscal year, how many are approving in their town, for their town school, a increase over last year's budget above your 4.74 request?
I don't know how many will approve. I'm saying what we can observe at this point would be the request being made by the superintendent. For example, the superintendent of Blackstone Millville,
Yeah.
presenting to 2 of our member towns and 2 of your partners. That request is about 8%.
Okay, so you don't know, do you know last year, how many of the schools went 4.74 above the previous year?
Well, we didn't do that either a year ago.
No,
But-
I'm
but-
asking.
So,
No, I understand. But your budget, if it's approved by 9 of the 13 towns, just gets taken in total, correct?
that's part of the condition of the partnership in order to enjoy the reduced rate.
I understand that, but in other words, your 474 request, if you get 9 approvals, you're locked. We're all in at 474, right? So my question is, when you say you want to be a good partner, and not just, I assume, with Douglas, but the other 12 community towns you serve, do you look back at what they actually had for last year for increases, or what they're projecting for this year? I mean, I know you got in here this evening and didn't hear the entire Douglas school presentation, but the Douglas presentation, year over year over year, you've got to know this. And I'm sure it's not just Douglas. The numbers come in substantially lower for the schools, and I'll just speak to Douglas, than what you come in and ask for. And it's hard for me to have you sit here and say you want to be a good partner when you know that our public school also has concerns and increases. You used the phrase, we want to meet our obligations and continue to advance the system. We're just trying to meet our obligations. So how can you ask the town of Douglas to be one of the 13 towns that votes to get you to 9 to approve if you're asking for substantially more on a percentage basis than you know at least this town will be looking to approve for Douglas School? And I'm asking that sincerely. I don't understand how you think that that makes Blackstone Valley Tech come in here and be perceived as a good partner.
Let me help you with that.
Yeah,
If you look
will
at
you
the
please?
page in the budget book, it's called Return on Investment. It's towards the back end.
Michael, we've had that discussion, we'll get to that in a few minutes.
Well, I'm
I
just-
understand your return on investment, and you view that as the MCAS scores, and I don't view that as, I view that as the investment. I'm asking you why you think it's okay to come in here and ask for 474 from a town that you know won't come anywhere near that for its town budget.
And I want to help you respond to that if you give me a chance. And although you
Go ahead.
you concluded what my return on investment, that is not the point I wish to make. If you look at the page, which is return on investment at the bottom,
Yep.
okay, there is, where do you find it? Just to the back of the book.
Yeah. It's right after all the printed budget documents, right after page 13 in the book.
Right there.
Yep.
If you'd be kind enough to look at the bottom of that, okay, what you would find, one of the differences you find, and I've worked in the K through 12 system, and I wish them the very best, is you have a detailed delineation of the expenses that are in our budget that are oftentimes shared on the municipal side. They would include, as you look at this list, debt is not normally in the school budget, it's usually on the town side, right? Capital improvements, oftentimes a special warrant article. They certainly have been approved at the town meetings that I've attended throughout the district for 25 years, relative to improvements from anything from hot top to parking lots to playgrounds to fields. Workers' compensation is the next one, if you look. That generally is covered on the municipal side. Not in our case, it's in the budget. Okay, so it's got to be in the 4.74. Pension obligations, unemployment costs, health insurance, life insurance, property insurance, casual insurance, trash, recycling, snow removal. Sometimes you can work on an arrangement with the DPW. We can't do that. We don't have it. We've got to do our own, right? Federal revenues. I even heard recommendations relative to looking at to see what a town can share from maintenance costs with the school system to so many other things, from postage to you name it. The state revenue shortfalls. If there's a shortfall, a local school system can go to a special town meeting and make such a request, and I hope they're supported for that request. All right? Central office staff oftentimes are handled on the municipal side to perform varieties, not in our case, not in Douglas's VOCTEC system. Legal expenses, challenges, lawsuits, they're all in ours. We have no town to pass them along. The treasurer's audit, these are just examples. And so if anyone attempted to compare an apples and orange of what's in your 4.74, which is a percentage of against fewer dollars, right? And you have 12 other partners. The local system doesn't have 12 other partners relative to contribution. It's a very different scenario, but what we cover. And so I can look in comfort and say that we designed something so we won't have to come back to you and ask for more money. We've never asked for more money. We don't ask any town to pick up an expense that can be incorporated on our side. We've only, and we even self-funded our roof projects. Our local system doesn't have excess and deficiency funds. I wish they would redo that for the state, because I think school systems across the state and the municipalities could benefit from an opportunity to save money and then keep it within the side. But traditionally, the Mass Municipal Association hasn't been real pleased with that. They want the municipality to keep control. There are countless examples of what are in our budget, all right, that should provide you with the insight and the clarification for greater comfort than you seem to have.
Well, I'm not sure that answers my question, but I understand that that is your answer to my question. That's fine. Let me move on. So I think when I saw you a couple of years ago, you and I think, have a difference of opinion on this concept of, and it is in your booklet, it is on that page, return on investment. And you list the high MCAS scores as, part of the return on investment, right?
One example, yes?
Right, one example. And I view them as the investment. And, I got to tell you, I thought the Douglas school system, Douglas people came in tonight and did a great job giving us some numbers and showing us that while you've got the kids from each of the towns with great MCAS scores, there's then a dramatic fall off as they head toward taking their APs and what those scores are, or what the SAT scores are. And so I guess I don't understand where that disconnect is. Why are you getting the best kids academically, but they're then dropping off? I mean, with all due respect, no college asks for 10th grade MCAS scores on an app. They ask for AP scores, they ask for SAT scores. And so why is there such a drop-off when we make the investment and you're getting some of the best kids, and then their scores for college are dropping off? Your placement, you saw me, I took a look at everything you gave me tonight. I took that against the Douglas one, just the Douglas one. And just the Douglas one has, more rankings in the US News top 30, top 50, top 100 than you guys have across 13 schools. So I continue to be concerned when you talk about a good partner about this suitability issue, this concept that you're taking kids that have great MCAS scores, 8th grade I'm sure as well. We don't have those numbers. You've got those kids, but then there's the big drop-off. And how can you be a better partner by having, you said you weren't involved directly in the application process, but I assume the three of you in some level are involved in a macro level with how you guys review applications, what the criterion are for what kids you take. I can tell you from this seat on the Douglas Finance Committee, I want you to be taking kids who are going to have these great benefits from all your trade programs, but not be the kids that might have wanted, with their great MCAS scores, to go to great colleges and don't seem to be able to get to them.
I'm sorry you see it that way. And sorry you don't celebrate the 102 youngsters who just completed the skills and distinguished themselves across the state competitions.
I celebrate all of that, Michael.
Okay.
Michael, don't misunderstand. I'm celebrating all the great things you guys do. I don't want you to misunderstand that.
Well, I don't read it that way. Not based on the nature of your comments, okay? Let me also point out that we don't have MCAS scores for the admission criteria. There's no exam to come in. Students in our system oftentimes come in based on what we subsequently discover with like needs improvement scores at the 8th grade level. But their improvement, their commitment, their willingness to respond to our education. I'm sorry you haven't noticed or followed our AP scores and the number of students who have done so well, and staggering increases. We've been recognized by the state AP programs for things.
Maybe across technical schools, but I've got numbers in front of me that show that on qualified scores, 3, 4, and 5, Blackstone Valley's coming in at 35%, when it looks like every other school in your district is coming in higher. Douglas's number is 65%.
You see,
What's going on?
I'm
What's
not,
the difference?
I would celebrate the success of any of the sending school systems. I would not, in other words, it's interesting to attempt to select certain components and to say, you're doing better, so you're doing better in this, we're doing better in.
You do it.
In what way?
You do it with the MCAS.
My comparison was against all vocational technical schools. That was intentionally not to create the type of, whatever, you versus them kind of suggestion that you're advancing.
Okay. I appreciate your time. Thank you.
It's what we do.
Can we talk a little bit about the Douglas enrollment and how it's increased? And I know we've gone over it just about every time you've been here, but just some things I've discovered. And again, from our side of the aisle over here, we're trying to figure out how do we budget going forward these increases. So in fiscal year 2012, we had an enrollment of 66. According to our fiscal year 19 assessment, we're going to have an enrollment of 112. So essentially, we've doubled over the last 7 years at an additional cost of. So like in fiscal year 2012, our assessment was just over $500,000. The 2019, it'll be just over $1.2 million. So that's a $700,000 increase over essentially 7 fiscal years, which is a huge increase, obviously, for a town of Douglas' size. So I was on your website, and I happened to come across the admissions policy. So I just wanted to read these 2 paragraphs from you and see how it kind of jives with these numbers we're seeing here. So basically it says, Blackstone Valley Regional Vocational Technical School District is governed by a school committee composed of 1 elected member with residency consideration for each town and district-wide election across all 13 communities. Annually, the admissions committee makes a recommendation to the school committee regarding the number of positions available for new students for the coming school year. Originally, those targeted ratios were established by comparing each town's student population in grades 9 through 12. Those original ratios have changed only slightly due to each town's commitment to building expansions over the years. Since Valley Tech is a selective secondary school, these ratios apply only to the extent that each town provides qualified applicants. Qualified applicant is one whose scores in the selection process puts a student in rank order above the cutoff score. Cutoff score is based on the number of positions the school committee has determined are available for new students for the coming year. So how I read that, and maybe I don't understand, is you guys determine what the cutoff score is. And then all those students above the cutoff score would then be proportionally accepted into BVT based on the ratio due to each town's student's population. That's what those 2 paragraphs sound like to me. So I'm trying to understand how Douglas goes from, and I know we've had more applicants, we clearly have, and I totally understand that, but how we go from 66 in FY 2012 to 112. So that means, are the other towns not providing qualified applicants for this pool, and thus Douglas students are be taking instead of those towns' ratio of students? Is that how it's working?
Well, I mean, the school committee has to make a vote relative to the budget to support the, to be in compliance with the state numbers of student ratios for our contract, but for OSHA and for the state standards for VOC-TEC education. So there's the relationship of the school committee's involvement. The school committee is not involved in admissions per se. What you're reading from is the state-approved admissions process, okay, filed with the state and fully acceptable to them. And it exists in a similar fashion among the 26 regional vocational schools in Massachusetts. I think the quick answer is Douglas is doing an excellent job of preparing candidates to compete, and the interest in coming is strong. There were 83 applicants from Douglas. So in spite of the fact that you feel that we're dropping the ball and things, that there's an awful lot of interest in coming to give us the opportunity to work with the students.
So am I misunderstanding these 2 paragraphs I read? So these 2 paragraphs seem to indicate to me that your admissions committee determines a cutoff score.
Yes.
Correct. So, and then uses the ratio of the student population of each town to accept candidates from each town per that ratio that have the accepted score. So is that incorrect? Is that an incorrect
I didn't write
understanding?
that, but I'm saying that I think
It's your mission policy on your website.
I didn't write a lot of things on our
Okay.
website, but I just, like I just worked
Okay.
there. But I'm just saying that, but the admissions policy has a criteria, much of which is based, we reduced the emphasis of grades because we were asked to do that by the sending town colleagues. And so the admissions people look, they have a cutoff score, okay, because they're looking at the whole pool of 800 applications.
Okay.
Against the criteria that was approved by the state. It's a 100-point criteria.
Okay.
Okay, and then so if they have 50 scores of 88, then they have to, work their way through all the ties in the process.
This doesn't seem to indicate ties. This indicates that anyone who's over the score. So
No,
I would
I'm saying the scores themselves, you could have, with 800 applications, your frequency count of a given score in the cutoff could be a number of candidates. Is that not logical?
Okay, yeah.
Okay, and so and then the admissions criteria, the admissions team, which is, which doesn't involve us, okay?
Who does it involve?
It involves the admissions people who are trained, they're counselors. They're trained admissions counselors.
Okay,
And the
so
special ed director who's
do they
looking at
work at the
special
school
education.
full-time, or are they hired?
Oh, they're full-time. No, full-time.
Okay, so,
Can we finish Brian's?
go ahead.
I'm sorry,
Sorry.
it's counseling personnel.
So let me go back to this just one more time. Let's say the cutoff score is 100. Let's just say it's a
Total, no, not cutoff. Total number of points a candidate could earn, 100 points.
Okay, let's say the cutoff score is 80. I'm just my example,
go
okay?
ahead. Yeah, okay.
So the way I read this is you would then look at each town and check their student population and say, do I have enough kids from Millbury to meet their, over 80 to make their student ratio? Do I have enough kids from Blackstone to make their student ratios? Do I have enough kids from Grafton to make theirs over the score to make their ratio? And then for those, so you need to get a number, and if you had not yet reached the amount of students you're accepting for that year, you would then fill in with the people from other towns. Is that?
I don't believe it works that way, okay? The way in which I believe it works, well, whatever, I'm saying, I believe
Okay.
the way it works, and is that if, in your hypothetical, your cutoff score was 80,
Yeah,
and so enough Douglas candidates scored 90,
okay,
that you never worked your way all the way down, the whole pool is 800, sorry.
yeah.
Okay? It's not town-specific. It's a whole pool of 13 towns and 11 feeder school districts.
What about the percentage of school population?
I get that.
That was the original way in which the school identified goals, okay, relative to building a vocational technical school. And actually, that was done on a K through 12 enrollment, if you go back 53 years.
So, in essence, you're cherry picking from the top of all the contributing communities.
No, that's interesting. I'm saying the students who have competed have strengthened their ability to get into the vocational school they want to enroll. They compete against other students.
So why doesn't this just say we're going to take the best, i.e. we're going to take the best students who apply no matter what town they come from? Why wouldn't that say that as opposed to talk about ratios of each student's population, et cetera, et cetera?
Well, it's
Targeted
still,
ratio.
it's still a goal to try to get, it's when we talked about this a year ago, with the fact when you witnessed, and I'm saying, looking over the past 4 years, Douglas had an increase of 2 students, then no increase, then a 15 increase, and then the 16 increase. So, that's a 4-year. You went deeper than that. You went further back,
Correct.
for example.
Yep.
Okay? And so that tells me that the Douglas candidates in the 8th grade are competing very successfully against the other school systems to get into the vocational technical school, and the admissions people are. Now, let's look at how this works. The youngster, we certainly wouldn't say to a youngster, you did too well, sorry, you can't come. So they're earning their way to compete, as they will in industry.
Okay,
don't
well,
think
as
that's
long as your admissions
Well,
policy
you said
says
cherry picking,
that's what
so-
you're going to.
Well, yeah, what you're doing is you are cherry picking. What you're saying is there are 800 students. Well, who scored a 95? We're not going to go a percentage based on town. We're going to pick whoever scored a 95 and above. We're going to take all of them. So if it comes all from Douglas, then it comes all from Douglas. If, 70% of it comes from Douglas, 70%. It doesn't matter. You're not applying to a ratio based on any numbers that are anywhere based in reality. What you're doing is you're taking the top talent from every community and you're applying it to your school, and then you're claiming that you have the best school in the area based upon those figures. Well, of course you do. If you took the top students from every school district.
Well, the admissions process hasn't traditionally generated merely, a top student, okay, in that regard. The admissions people are looking at, there's an interview process where the interview team is very impressed by the level of commitment that somebody who wants to be an auto mechanic or whatever they choose to be. And so these are components, okay, it's not like an exam where the highest scores are advanced. The criteria, which includes behavior and attendance, and considers, medically documented absences, okay, but looks at the recommendation of the sending school counselor. So the sending school has a say in determining who would be best served by Blackstone Valley Tech. And then the admissions team conduct an interview where they're very much interested. And special education is interested in making certain that there is, right now, is a 14% category of special needs. So there's kind of mirroring the population. So it's not just a creaming factor in the way in which people compete. And so the other thing we've tried to do is, say you take ties. Say there's a tie in the school, 88. We've asked the admission people, not to interfere with civil rights or any other issues here, to be mindful of a community that has students at the same score that is, let's say, underrepresented. We've asked them to do that, and you encouraged that, and we agreed to do that, and we've tried to advance that. But clearly, over the past 2 years, Douglas is still competing highly effective as far as the recommendations from the sending school, everything, the whole process.
But part of the reason I feel like this is written this way, and it's a very similar language than the actual agreement between the 13 towns that BVT has, is so towns can somehow predict and forecast with some measure of confidence what we're going to pay year after year. If towns know, well, it is going to be pretty close to our ratio of student population, we can then forecast how much cost to allocate in our budget to BVT. Now, just the last 2 years alone, we've gone from $761,000 assessment to $1.2 million.
Right.
So that's $400,000 with no more than the few months when your letter comes in the fall for us to prepare for that. So I would just ask, if you're not going to adhere to your admissions policy, that you rewrite it, or if you I have a different word, and however, the best can go for the best. Like, your school is a fantastic school, right? And if people want to go there, I'm fine with that. But I just wish I feel like we're not being honest about it, just saying the best students are going to get in, no matter from which of the 13 towns. That seems like a very simple statement and very easily one to put in your admissions policy. Instead, we talk about ratios and stuff, which, at least over the last 2 years for Douglas, have not really been adhered to, and definitely over the last 6 or 7.
Well, I wouldn't agree that we're not adhering to our admissions policy. I just have a different way of reading it, okay? With all due respect, but I'll be glad we can revisit it and ask others to revisit to see whether or not there's a need for clarification. We're not allowed to just to do anything relative to admissions. It's really strongly monitored, relative by the state. What's turned out, Douglas's increase is some ways is a catch-up to be at the 9% that you were paying on debt, which is on the blue page. All right, you weren't at 9%, but you were paying a mortgage at 9%. When you look at the number, if you go to the blue page, debt page, it's 9%. You're now.
3 years prior.
What?
It was 3 years prior.
Yeah,
You guys
that's
were at 9%.
you're back to a percentage of where you are paying the mortgage to the time when you voted that, and some of it was a catch-up. All right, so there's 1 year FY17, there's 0 increase. All right, so if the next year is 15, is that like 6 and 7, that kind of thing?
So are you telling me, Dr. Fitzpatrick, that most of the communities in here over the last 7 years have had their assessment more than double? Is that what you're trying to tell me? If you're trying to say we're just catching up to what it is, I can't imagine that most communities of this 13, I haven't run the numbers myself, have gone up over 140% since fiscal year 2012.
If you're moving up substantially in your percentage from where you were, okay, you're going to find yourself impacted by that. Not every town, okay, had that kind of return to the 9% that it was when it voted the debt, or the difference, the delta, okay? And part of it's a catch-up.
But you can understand the frustration from our end is we have no idea what seems to be coming down the pike, and I still insist this admissions policy is written this way, so it's similar to how the agreement is written, so towns can have some predictability of what kind of expenses to expect in upcoming years.
Not only that, but I think
fairness.
My reading of that and what the intentions may have been is that it was also to give fair representation of access to your facility for the students within the surrounding towns. I don't know, I mean, this chart here doesn't show student populations 9 through 12.
Correct.
To really accurately say, okay, maybe we've got 9% of the population at your facility, but do we only have 4, 5, or maybe we've got 15% of the total population of students in this age bracket across the 13 towns. Where I'm coming from is I would look at this and say, if I was a town, say, you know, say Hopedale on here, it's the number 13 as far as admission goes. I don't know what their student population looks like, but if they were 50th percentile amongst the 13 towns, and they were bottom as far as admissions, I would say that they were being underrepresented. And if I was a student from that town, I'd say I'm not being provided an equal opportunity in that to potentially the assets inside of that school system.
Well, the mathematical example you introduce is one of the reasons why I responded the way I did as far as going forward, okay? In that, how many total students are there now, okay? And that's certainly a consideration and a conversation that has to be recognized and realized. Milford is upset that you know, they don't have more kids here at Valley Tech.
Well, that's Michael's point.
Yeah, I got that.
That's my point.
So,
they
but-
probably have more students
That's right.
as a percentage of all the 13. You know.
When did you get away from doing it on a percentage of the school-age students versus just based on your formula? Your 88 or higher?
Well, one of the things that happened is the population at the school doubled from 660 to 1250. Okay,
No,
so
but when did you get away from using a percentage of the town's overall 9 through 12 enrollment?
I'm not aware that it did that, okay? Not in my 25 years.
Before, or that it got
No,
away
in my
from-
25 years, I've not seen that.
That
Okay?
it ever did that?
No, I'm not aware of that in 25 years. I can't speak for 53 years,
Yep.
okay?
Now, I'm sorry, I don't want to just keep peppering him, but it seems like, so is there a ceiling? I guess is what this body is getting at. Is there a ceiling, or year over year, is it whatever your board determines it to be? We have vague languages, and we have, you know, oh, we'll work with you, you know, we want to be a good partner, but I want a hard figure. I want a ceiling. What is the percentage that you can take no more than? That enables the town to budget in a way that says, okay, well, worst case scenario, this many kids go to Douglas. I mean, this many kids go to BVT. But if you don't give us a ceiling to say, well, you know what, as a percentage of your student population, we can only take this many, we can't budget that because it's open season. It could be 1, it could be 50. You're not in all fairness, you're not in the admissions process by your own admission. So if you need to return with that data, or rather if you need to get that data to us, then that's fine. But at some point, by the language of the agreement and by the language of that, there has to be a percentage involved somewhere. I need that number. We would like that number to see what that ceiling is. What is the hard ceiling year over year that you can take from the town?
Yeah. Well,
exist, as we don't.
we certainly have to protect the civil rights of the ability for the students to compete. When you have 800 applications, I don't think they ever envisioned that, okay? That's a pretty unusual development, okay? And so this has caused, you know, pretty strong competition, okay?
So let's update the agreement and revote with the 13, if that's what we're talking about.
Well, it's one thing you can do that. You have to advance in 13 different towns and 13 different town meetings, but relatively, the 9% that you find yourself would have been my answer to what is the goal for Douglas. It would be the very 9% that's reflective in the debt, and now you're there relative to the operation. It would have been the number I gave you if you had asked me that, aside from the other conversation that's taken place.
Then I would be arguing in fiscal year 2012, we were getting shorted. We weren't getting as many students into BVT as we wanted to, right? I mean, we're just looking for some sort of consistency and predictability, and you know, it's just, I would love it if every kid who wanted to go for BVT for Douglas, we could afford to send, right? I'm school choice, right? Wherever you want to go, but that's not the fiscal reality we're dealing with currently, right? And so we're trying to figure a way to budget and make choices in this community based on what these rising costs are going to be. But my fear is, in another 6 years, our assessment might be $2 million. And then, we talked a little bit about increasing population, and, you said it's hard to predict, and I agree with that, but you gave no indication you weren't going to continue to increase the total population of the school.
Well, I said it would be tempered relative to its growth, and that we have a number of factors that drive the total population of the school. They include the state standards, the negotiated contract relative ratios, OSHA, and a variety of others. We're not allowed to put more than, in certain shop areas, like 22 students. It's controlled by safety factors. So you can't, as much as you might say, well, we'd like to put 40, you can't do that. I mean, in our case, it's never appropriate to put 35 kids in a kindergarten classroom, all right? But in our case, you put 35 kids in a machine, they close you down. Okay, so we don't,
I hear you, but we just, so, you're basically telling us if the elite students in Douglas compared to other towns, you're going to continue to accept them, which, right, like I said, school choice, that's fine. We're also going to continue to increase enrollment. I mean, it's like, when does it end for Douglas students, and how does this town afford to pay those assessment fees?
Well, Douglas pays $10,408 a student based on the budget that's before you, as voted by my school committee.
Correct.
That is, many towns do not pay that per pupil. They pay more.
Okay,
Okay, so they pay a higher rate.
fair enough.
Just for the record.
Is that in this document?
You have to do the math. You have to do the math. Go
Have
ahead.
to do math.
You're very good
I
at
know
math.
how to do
Pam.
that.
But
I've done it in the past.
If we can't afford the 10,000 figure, it doesn't matter if it's 16,000, if it's 20,000. If we can't afford the 10, we can't afford the 10.
But there's a difference in Massachusetts, and the students have an option to hand you a bill to pursue a vocational technical education elsewhere if you didn't have this partnership. That would be a heck of a lot more money.
So then my follow-up question would be, do you happen to have the numbers handy on the number of Douglas students that go to BVT for a specific field and don't get into that field, are forced to take another education? Does every Douglas student that goes to BVT get into the program that they want to take?
Well, let's look at that, okay?
What
What we have experienced, okay,
Yeah.
is that 51% of the ninth graders who come in across all the towns change their mind in the program they thought they wanted to take. From the one they declared, this is my anticipated preferred major. The first half of the ninth grade is what we call exploratory. You go through 7 different occupational areas. You increase the information you have, career education, decision. 51% change their mind, okay? After that, what's the percentage of first choice? It's very high.
Yeah.
Not 100%, it's very high.
No, it's in the 90s.
So 90% following the ninth grade experiences, now we're able to match them up.
Okay, so after
That's the whole district.
Right. After they explore ninth grade.
No, halfway through the ninth.
Halfway through, and they change their mind, then 90% of them, you're saying, get their first choice.
That's correct.
Correct.
We monitor that. And we have charts on that too. Did that answer that question?
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, I feel like we've beaten a dead horse with that, so, does anyone else have anything on that?
Well, just the observation that Dr. Fitzpatrick did make mention that he has the ability to change class sizes and classrooms. So that definitely can change the numbers of students that go there. If you recall, a few years ago, there was a request to, I think, put an addition on the school. And I believe all the towns voted not to recommend that. And I think it was driven by town managers who correctly looked at it and said, well, wait a minute, if we increase the size of the school, then the numbers of students are going to go up exponentially, and we really can't afford that. None of the valley towns can afford it. However, I think Dr. Fitzpatrick, if I recall, a year or so after that vote, made mention of the fact that his students, his in-house, was able to effect changes and add to the school so that he could bring in more students. If I'm not correct, let me know.
Well, let me share a response to both those points. When I talked about the reconfiguration, I gave an example of electronics and health. Those would be the shop side, that week only. One of the biggest challenges the principal has is our academic classes are maxed. While you can reconfigure shops, that would be the week of shop.
Right.
When you go the other week, if there's no more room in the academic classes, you're not increasing your numbers much. Okay? We are pretty much maxed, and I've shared that, kind of part. The second thing is, when I asked, was it 3 years ago, whatever, for a 2.9 expansion, 7 towns voted in favor. 7 in favor, okay? But we did not, the school committee asked for a recommendation and said, if all the towns are not eager to enter into additional debt, okay, which is 2.9 million wasn't a
It
lot of
wasn't the debt. It wasn't the debt.
I
It was.
understand that, but, okay, but all I'm saying is 7 towns still wanted to do that, okay, they voted in the affirmative. Some of the towns didn't vote at all because we said that we weren't going to advance it when we went to, because the town meetings stretch over 2.5 months.
Thank you.
One more question, our famous question. How many nursing students do we have?
1.
Only one? I thought it was it
One?
more?
You have 1.
Oh, we have one. Douglas has one. Oh, we've got 19 million other students, that's all.
Okay. I'm going to open up to questions from the audience. I ask you do go through me, just so I can keep things orderly. And if you could just step up to the mic so they could hear you at home. Sherry, you had your hand up. You're welcome
That's
to
a
go
good
first.
idea.
Just say your name and address for the minute taker, please.
Sherry Zetlin, 7 Hilltop Drive. I have 3 separate questions, just in response to a couple of things that came up. Were you just granted a $4 million grant for expansion?
No.
Okay, because I thought I read in the newspaper that you've just been, within the last several months, granted $4 million by the state.
No, but I'll clarify it, the status, because I think that's the nature of your question, if I may.
Yep, please do.
The governor has a $1 billion capital improvement plan, all right, and that we put a request to be eligible for $4 million of that in the event it is advanced.
So that would eventually, if you were granted that money, you would be able to expand your programs even further.
Well, we're a 53-year-old building. We would then, if given money, which we would not be asking the towns for money because it's another way of like self-funding our roof project, we would look to see whether or not we can make improvements in our facilities to make it a better place for all the students that we serve.
Okay. My next question goes to your exploratory program. From what I understand, once our students have completed their exploratory program, they're ranked. So they test out of it. And only the highest percentage, the students with the highest ranking actually get into what they chose as their exploratory, what they wanted their path to be. So that's a little bit different than, they're kind of being forced to create a different path for themselves than they really wanted because they didn't get a 91 or above or whatever the actual number is. So it's a little bit inaccurate to say that they're changing their own path. They don't want to, it's just that you have a testing that goes to that.
That's not my observation. Okay, 40 years in the business, okay, it's my observation that the 26 regional Voc Tech schools have a very similar exploratory process that we do. A youngster comes in the 9th grade, okay, and explores 7 different areas. And they're ranked for all 7, that part's true. And which is also an indication whether the student has found interest. And we make it clear to students that you can't do very poorly in a program because you're not that crazy about it, okay, that it's going to be a total score across the 7 vocational paths that you've explored in the first year. And they oftentimes discover that the trade is very different. I mean, for example, there are parents or grandparents that have encouraged a student to pursue graphic arts, thinking it was the days of the printing presses. Today it isn't. It's all online. Okay, it's web-based, so it's very different than what they're experiencing. Many of the middle school experiences don't offer a lot of strong career education, so in some cases, this is the first career education that the youngster has to go through 7 different programs. Then there's placement, but based on the data that I see, 90% of the students have agreed with the placement, which is the composite of the 7 programs they've looked at. because they have a lot more information than they had previously.
Sure, I understand what you're saying. However, that's not the information that I'm getting from students that are going to BVT from Douglas. That's not what I've heard firsthand, that they chose engineering, that was their path. They didn't receive a 91, so they had to choose one of the other two avenues. So I just, that's the information that is being told to me by my neighbors, my friends, our students.
I can also tell you, I've had conversations with both parents and students. I'm not sure, it's not a Douglas-specific observation here, where the student has, might have indicated, so say engineering, which is a very popular program, although, as I said, health assisting is the most popular, multimedia and culinary still remain the most popular. That they were very pleased that they were encouraged to take a program different than the one that they thought they might like. Now, is it possible that with 315 students coming in a freshman class, that somebody is unhappy with where they end up? Yeah, chances are pretty good that somebody's not happy somewhere. Okay, but it's a process that seems to satisfy the vast majority of the students, and it's pretty much replicated in vocational schools across the state of Massachusetts. It's not seamless or perfect, but it's the, you wouldn't want to put 100 students in plumbing. You'd saturate the career path opportunities in the district if everybody were funneled into only certain programs.
But if that's what they wanted to do, and they're going to a vocational school to do plumbing because that's what they want, then shouldn't they be afforded that opportunity?
That's not our experience. We have people who said, I think I want to do this, and then after the 7 exploratories, we might have somebody who wasn't completely pleased with the process, but more often than not, you have someone say, wow, that career is a lot different. I didn't have any experience before in that trade. It's very different than I thought. I don't want to do that. I want to do this.
Okay. My last question is, I'd like to know how much of your budget is being sent to out-of-district special education placements and how much is being spent on special education transportation?
We have, we don't have out-of-district special ed placements. Oh. We deal with it internally. Now, if you look at during
your students, you can keep all your students. You don't have any extraordinary circumstances?
I'm not sure. Are you aware, though, during the time I served as superintendent, I created a substantially, a more severe and profound special ed situation for 44 students from the district, and took them in and hired speech therapists, occupational therapists, and a variety of other special education people to offer an additional program. But I asked the sending schools, and the towns really, to pay an additional tuition so I could pay the staff to provide those additional services. And 44 students from the district came to that program. And at the time, there's no current superintendent serving now, but at the time, when the Commissioner of Education decided that the MCAS scores would not be counted by BVT, but by the school that sent the student, they stopped sending me the students and stopped paying the additional tuition. So over the years, we have added additional special education programming, but asked for additional money to do it so that we could provide a successful opportunity for these youngsters. Right? And we haven't had a willingness, or even look at the financial limitations that the communities are facing to do that, to offer additional programs. We have roughly 14% special needs. Our students, even when I offered that program, we didn't have specialized transportation except for one youngster with a mechanized wheelchair. The other students rode the bus to come to Valley Tech, and they were mainstream, but we had all kinds of additional support. At Valley Tech, it's more common for us to take a special education personnel, almost always duly certified. I have a special ed person certified in math, special ed, he speaks Arabic. Just an example of what we've been able to recruit to respond to students that had those characteristics. And we send the staff more out to the classrooms rather than pulling kids out. Now, in fairness, I've worked in a local school system. We're not likely to be surprised by a last-minute placement, because we already can see who's coming in. So we can design our programs, hire our personnel, like the aid that I've asked for this budget to include for next year, because we know it's a known, it's not a surprise. Local system doesn't have that. I've always lobbied for circuit breaker, even though we don't enjoy that money. to help the local school system.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so how do you get
1 second, Justin, let Eric take it, and then I'll
get
close.
special needs? How are those, so they would have to apply like everybody else, right? And I would assume that perhaps, I think it'd be fair to say that there's probably a smaller percentage that would meet the cutoff score. Would you agree with that?
That's where the admissions personnel that participates in the admissions review is using her professional judgment. Okay, and as I mentioned, some of those other factors, they're just not based on like a test score.
Justin?
Sorry, my alarm is going off at the library, and I've got to go figure that out. I am Justin Snook. I'm the director of the Simon Fairfield Public Library here in town. If you've read the papers, you've probably seen that contingent on a 2.5 override passing this year, my department is going to close. This building's been here since 1903, so you think you've got building issues with a 15-year-old building, try a 114-year-old building. But, you know, we're both educators. You know, you're at the very top of the totem pole. I'm at the very bottom of the totem pole. So, you know, after BVT, after the schools, after everything else, you know, we're sort of scrabbling for the scraps to see what we can do for the most underserved people represented in this community. My budget, you know, last year is $214,000. That is entirely subsumed by the BVT assessment from, you know, last year to this year. And I'm not trying to minimize your problems. I'm not trying to tell you, you know, that you're not being fiscally responsible or anything like that. I'm just asking you, you know, I'm begging you, if there's any other revenue stream you can tap, if there's any other way you can fund something just to take some of the pressure off. The town might have a library after July 4th. Barring that, though, it's really up in the air. I'm sorry, I've got to run.
Good luck.
Thank you, Justin.
All the way around.
I would encourage them to reach out to our vocational technical coordinators to see what kind of work we might do to be helpful. I know over the years we've done doors and cabinet making and shelving, things like whatever can be done, kind of thing. One of the differences for us, you take away $1, it's gonna have a ripple effect across 12 other contributors. So $1 is not $1 for us.
Anybody else in the audience have a question? Come on up.
Leslie Bro, 20 Depot Street. In asking for such a large percentage increase, I'm curious what you've looked at. We've been in the position, I'm sure you've heard, at our high school, of having gone from a $150 user fee a couple years ago. Maximum a family would be out would be $450 for the year. We had a boosters club that had to raise $100 grand a couple years ago. People were paying $300 per sport, per student. I had 3 kids playing sports at one time. Okay? That's over $2,500. I'm curious what your user fee is and why we're expected to make those sacrifices. And it's not happening on that end. It's, oh, well, we need to add this, we need to add that. How do you justify that?
Well, not sure where the observation comes that we don't look at a variety of revenue streams. It's one of the reasons why we brought a sample check.
I'm not talking revenue streams. This wasn't a revenue stream. This was a huge cut.
No, you reference fees.
Mm-hmm.
Right, okay. Here are some of the fees that involve. First of all, at Valley Tech, each of our students is expected to perform services. They report to the Three Seasons restaurant, for example. Last week they reported for 265 people at $125 a plate gourmet dinner.
Michael, it's getting late. Could you answer her question?
I'm talking about fees and what it's
We're just trying to
costing.
stay
We
focused on the
use
question.
alternative ways
What's your
of
fee?
labor.
What's
Now
your
let me hold
sports?
on,
Can I
just
ask
a
you-
second. I'll give
what's
you
your
just a
sports
second.
fee?
I'll give you a chance and I'll respond to your
Please let
question.
it- please
I
let us-
wanted to set the tone for you so you recognize we don't rely upon fees. We use multiple. Here are some of the fees. Class dues are $20, parking's $40, athletics $50, cap and gown $28, AP exam $85, PSAT $16, cosmetology kit $390. Those are just examples.
All right, sorry, our class dues are higher, sports, so.
Well, okay.
I just don't understand the justification for such, we've had to cut to try to get. We don't have other revenue streams. So that's a high percentage to ask when member towns are really getting it from all sides.
We raise more money through multiple forms and also have fees. And I'm suggesting that would be difficult for a local system to do that. But you should give us
But you could
just...
have a smaller percentage increase that you're asking the
Yeah,
towns
well,
for.
it wasn't long ago, we asked for less, less than 2%.
I think what she's trying to say, if you increased your athletic fees, you're, not to a large extent, the assessment would go down because you have an additional revenue source. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah, because it's not coming from.
Because you get an additional revenue.
And I'm
from
saying that we
category.
asked the students to raise money through alternative means, we raised more dollars. I brought some sample brochures, this is the next fundraiser after the gourmet dinner last week. Most school systems don't have a gourmet dinner, we do. The kids work, they raise money. This is the golf tournament, the schedule, that's the next one. It's constant activity. We raise more money than we would whack in the families for $300 for a sports fee.
We have to do both.
Well, I don't know how much money you raise in your gourmet dinner, but I'm saying we try not to create this type of we encourage fundraising that has resulted in the revenue streams we have to do what we do.
Have to agree to disagree, I guess.
That's such a low shot.
It's interesting, it only works one way, huh?
I'm sorry, what?
No, I'm talking about his comment.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear his comment.
I wish I had.
I apologize if I
think
did not hear it.
I think at this point it's getting a little contentious.
Is there anyone else in the audience who wants to speak? Okay, great. Anybody have any other questions here? Okay, thank you guys very much for coming and answering all of our questions. It was a long meeting and
I'll answer your two.
Appreciate it.
I won't forget your two questions. Your follow-ups.
Oh, good. Oh, just one more thing. You were able to send to the town about 5 months ago the bad news that our assessment was going up by an exorbitant amount. And we thank you for that notice. However, to receive this tonight at this hour is really poor. I mean, finance committee people like to look at numbers so we can ask intelligent questions, and to look at it as you're going over it is just not good. Perhaps our Mr. Lavin, who's our representative that we pay $500 a year, could be bringing them again and start that again to the town.
It's been on the website for at least
Earlier.
2 weeks, maybe 3.
I'm gonna say something, please.
It's on the
I would
website.
have brought it, but I had something happen in the family. For the last 4 years, I brought them and I put them in
Yes,
here.
you have. Yes, you have.
Okay, so this
Yeah.
year I couldn't.
Well, I didn't
My
know.
mother was in the hospital and that was more important
Of
than a
course.
piece of paper being delivered to the town.
It
I'm
is on-
sorry.
it is
I
on the
apologize.
website. It is on the website.
Thank you.
I apologize.
no problem.
Okay?
No problem.
So, but I don't like being,
For the
I do
record,
deliver.
Well, usually you bring it. That's why I was a little wondering where it was.
for the record, my dad served on the school committee, and I'm the eldest of a family of 7. So thank you for your service.
Okay. Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks.
And a finance committee.
There you go, thanks.
That all works, Sam.
I want to see you stick it through the teller's window.
Oh, yep. Come on up. No?
Kelly Grady, Southeast Main Street, and I totally understand the late hour. I've got kids texting me, where am I?
You've waited all evening.
I'm not able to come to the April 10th.
Okay.
So if I could beg 2 minutes to say, this meeting came at probably the best time because we got the BVT letters today. I have an 8th grader. I have 3 children. One graduated last year and I cannot say how well he was prepared for college. He is having a phenomenal freshman year, and it is due to the education he got here in Douglas.
Okay.
I have a daughter who is a junior at Douglas, who had been admitted to BVT, chose to stay, and again, having a phenomenal year and is more than prepared for where she needs to be. I never thought I would be considering sending my third to BVT. If it was something he wanted, sure, but he went through the application process. He did get admitted. We're very proud of him.
Congratulations.
But the comment, what was your word? Consistency? Stability? I've lost track of which word.
Certainty.
Certainty, thank you. I've lost track of what word. That's the problem I'm having. I would dearly love to have my third kid come through here. I'm really invested. We've done a lot. It's that certainty that is making me question whether he should go to BVT or not. And that is the only thing, because I do have two kids who've had phenomenal experiences. I can't say enough about how great these schools are with how little money they get. But the question I have is, I figure I could get him through another year, maybe 2, but is there going to be 4 years of it? So.
Of what?
Of certainty that.
With regard to what?
With regards to the fact that the teaching staff will not be cut again, that the class sizes will not be increased again, particularly in the high school, that the breadth of the offerings will be there.
Academic or sports or both?
Both, and actually this is my one kid that's not a sports kid. So I'm looking at, is there going to be, not maybe music, is there going to be drama, is there going to be other things that are out there? Because I'll tell you, when we did the BVT tour, what interested him was the other things. It wasn't the shops, it wasn't the classes. Those were all interesting, but it was, you walked around and they have this club, they have that club, they have everything. And he looked at me, he goes, this is what a school with money has. I said, that's exactly right.
Can I ask you, early tonight, when the superintendent showed the numbers for the APs and the SATs, are those persuasive to you?
Oh, very.
Okay.
Very.
So does that help Douglas Public School help mom think about swinging the pendulum back toward Douglas Public?
All right, I'll tell you. This morning I got the mail.
We appreciate the input.
Saw it and went, God, I never really thought about it, but maybe he should go to BVT. And that's where my head was today. And I'll be very frank, I think they've left, that my kid really doesn't want to go to BVT. He's willing to consider it, but he keeps going, I think I'd like to stay. And I've heard bits and pieces, and I have kids who've taken APs. And I've had kids who've gotten good SAT scores. So I know what's coming out of Douglas. But to see that all in writing, that's huge. And I'm going to apologize to Mr. Maines in absentia because I never knew about a meeting for 8th grade parents. I missed that somewhere along the way. Maybe it's because it's my third kid and I tend to filter some of this.
That we're not getting to you about that meeting.
But somewhere I missed that meeting. I was probably at a different meeting. Yeah, we were raising money. I missed that one.
Her bigger point is she wants to know if there's going to be consistency.
But I want to know if my kid's going to graduate with the same quality that my other two graduated.
Frankly, I don't know that we could answer that question. We would say that the school committee is going to do their hardest. The teachers are going to do their best. But if the rest of the taxpayers of the town of Douglas don't want to vote a 2.5 override, can I tell you it's going to happen? No, I can't.
That's the wrong answer, Eric.
That's the wrong answer.
I think the other thing too is.
We've done it for year over year over year over year.
It'll keep happening.
You know that. You've got 2 tried and true that have worked. And every time we bridge the gap, teachers are working harder, the programs are there. My daughter loved field hockey, and the field hockey program dropped, and it broke her heart. But she knew school and academics and what she'd get in Douglas was far superior to what, I harp on these placement records. They're not even remotely close, if you look at the 2 groups, to where kids that are going to stay in Douglas can get to versus what the options narrow dramatically if you go to BVT. It might have it might have 3 more cool clubs, but when you're 18, that's done. And you need to have all the options for college or where they're going to go. Douglas offers that so much more.
I
And that's what.
fully
Professor
agree
Ma-
that-
That's what Superintendent Means, you know, the numbers you hadn't
Oh,
seen
yeah.
yet. Those were powerful numbers.
Well, I've
for
seen him because I go to the school committee meetings. So
Okay.
I saw his presentation last week. It was great. Loved it. Loved the last time they did the AP. I get very involved in this because I feel it's an important decision. And when this all started a few years ago, it was, I can get the first one through, wonder about the next two. Now I've got one that's got one more year. But I'm looking at 4 years. I'm looking at, do we stay in town? Do we leave the town? There's a lot of questions. But what I really wanted to say is, I think they've hit the nail on the head. It's that constancy, is that it's going to be here. And I understand there's all the town infighting and politics and the 2.5 and all that. But is the commitment to the schools there? And I know the school committee's committed, extremely committed. But is the town committed as well to saying, yes, we understand the importance of it, and we're going to do as much scraping as we can, as much as the schools do, to really put it there. And I think that would go a long way to keeping more kids here, is to really feel like that'll still be there. So I appreciate, I said 2 minutes, I know I went
Thank
over.
you very much.
Thank you very much.
Can I just address that?
Sure.
We do. We do on a daily basis. We work very well with, all our departments work well together, and we help each other, and we work collaboratively. So I think you have that commitment across the board, whether it's at the school, as well as the municipal side. We look at every penny. And we have since I've been here, and that's been 12 years.
Oh, I think the town does an amazing job, but I think that's the perception, and with a lot of the people leaving is like they said, is I don't trust that it's going to stay the same way.
Well, I think we're within our budgetary constraints. Every year we'll balance the budget. You know, how that looks is going to be the question. You know, it's very tough to get an assessment increase of 243,000.
Go ahead, Carol.
Well, I just want to bring up one thing, is you're looking at, obviously, the best education for your child because you want your child to go to college, and that's very good. But if you're sending your child to Blackstone Valley Tech, 1 week he's doing vocation, the other week he's doing academics. If you told me you wanted your son, or your son wanted to be a plumber, I'd say get him in Valley Tech. But if you're telling me your son wants to be in college, this is why I asked for his, you notice what he said? He said, well, the kids that go to college, they use their Blackstone Valley, their skills. I don't want to know what they're doing part-time. I want to know what they're doing 5 years out. Are we wasting money putting these kids in these schools instead of opening those vocational schools to that kid that wants to be the plumber, who really doesn't want to study philosophy and want to be a great writer? So that's one of the things. The other thing too is, when you think about there's no consistency. First off, I don't think Blackstone Valley Tech is the better one to get your kid into college. The second thing is, if you think any of these surrounding towns are going to be any more consistent than Douglas, you're wrong, because they're all hitting the same things. They're all not getting the money from the state. If you send your kids to these other schools, they're not going to do any better than they are here in Valley, because you don't know if that's consistent either. They're all looking at cutting too.
I think the other thing that's important on this list that we got from Blackstone Valley Tech tonight, this is colleges attended by students. This isn't completed, this is attended. That's somebody who applied, got in, but what did they do? Did they wear that next set of cap and gowns and march across the stage and get handed another diploma? Or did they make it a couple of years and decide, this isn't for me, I'm gonna go back to my tradeship? Or that's, I think, an important number. This is just an attended number, but what's the graduating rate at the next level?
Oh, well, he put on a great show, don't get me wrong.
Oh, he does every year. He does every year. It's,
By the way,
Did
you catch my exchange with him about how he got to the $4 million in scholarships? Okay.
Oh, yeah.
We've got to move on.
It's getting late. Chief, are you here for anything specific, or you just looking for something to do tonight and decided to come watch?
For the show.
It's got to go home.
We're putting advertising up on your board. You stepped out for a minute and missed
Some
it.
people watch American Idol, he comes to watch the town finance committee.
Gene, do we need to do this invoice tonight, or can we do it tomorrow night? Be honest.
Tonight would be awesome.
All right, let's do this. So, before we go, I have a invoice to approve the flyer for town meeting for $534.30. I'd be looking for a motion.
So moved.
I'd be looking for a motion to approve it.
Somebody approved it, or somebody moved
We
it.
already did.
Motion made by Mike, seconded by Eric. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. I need everyone's John Hancock before we get out of here.
Motion to adjourn and continue until tomorrow
We
evening.
can't hear it. Does anybody know what
Why?
the voices
Ryan.
want to know?
Could we send that to BVT to put some nice colors and styling on it?
I'm telling
it
you, we gotta put something
All right.
together
You
for
got
us. Send it over there and have them
Without-
put it
without
together.
Yeah, hey,
Each
while
of
the
us got a
cameras are
half
going
hour.
on, can I get a motion to adjourn?
Already?
Oh, can I get a second?
Second.
Motion made by Howard, seconded by Mike. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. See you in 21 hours.